Chapter 2939. The milky white fluorescence continued to wander in his divine soul, like countless stars in the sky. After a while, his body solidified a little, and the vitality coming from his body gradually became stronger. At a certain moment, Tianyang's gradually solidifying body suddenly transmitted a strong suction force, and the entire spirit sword peak's heaven and earth spirit chi surged into his body. In the blink of an eye, it was completely devoured by him. An even stronger suction force came out, and the wind and clouds on spirit sword peak roared. The spirit chi in the distance quickly flooded over, but it still could not meet Tianyang's needs. His body, which was formed by the spirit pill, seemed to have become a bottomless pit at this moment. No matter how much spirit chi came, it could be completely devoured. Wen Zishan noticed this and immediately took action. He communicated with the Azure Sun Temple's great protective array and gathered the spirit chi of the entire Azure Sun Temple to Spirit Sword Peak. Yang Kai even took out his Elder Jade Plate and controlled the spirit chi that was pouring into Spirit Sword Peak into Tianyang's body. The two divided the work and cooperated intimately. With the influx of spirit chi, the vitality in Tianyang's body became more and more exuberant. If there was a trace of unnaturalness in this vitality just now, then this trace of unnaturalness was slowly being eliminated. Tianyang's body was transforming into a real body of flesh and blood. The omnipresent heavenly way seemed to have noticed something. Suddenly, there was an indescribable heavenly might condensing on Spirit Sword Peak. Although it was very weak and had not even taken shape, Yang Kai and Wen Zishan were still shocked. The mighty force of heaven and earth. Yang Kai clearly perceived a trace of the mighty force of heaven and earth. The laws of heaven and earth in each world were different, and the only thing in common was the mighty force of heaven and earth. That was the origin of the world. It was the power of the entire world. Therefore, the Emperor realm controlled the laws of heaven and earth, while the great emperors had glimpsed the mighty force of heaven and earth. This was the fundamental difference between the two. Tianyang's existence was not tolerated by the star realm. Previously, he used the divine technique to conceal himself and avoid the heavenly way, but as time passed, this deceptive method gradually revealed itself. This allowed the heavenly Tao to sense his existence. Indeed, there was not much time left. If he did not let Tianyang create his physical body before the heavenly Tao revealed itself, he would definitely be expelled from this world and banished into the endless void. When that time came, even if Yang Kai had the Rainbow Soul Warming Lotus, he might not be able to save him. Yang Kai and Wen Zishan's faces were solemn as they quickly channeled the world energy of the entire Azure Sun Temple into Tianyang's body. This was the only thing they could do. The rest would depend entirely on Tianyang's own efforts. Time passed slowly, and the spirit chi in the Azure Sun Temple never stopped surging for a moment. The sound of wind and thunder constantly came from the Spirit Sword Peak. Tianyang's body became more and more solid, and his vitality became more and more vigorous. The power of the Way of the Heavens condensed on Lingjian Peak was also getting stronger and stronger, like a sharp blade hanging over everyone's head. It could be chopped down at any time. It made people feel anxious and uneasy. At a certain moment, Tianyang suddenly opened his eyes, and his hands made a few mysterious gestures that seemed to be fast but were actually slow. His newly created physical body seemed to be able to absorb all the world energy within a radius of dozens of miles. The milky white light that had been swimming in his body suddenly disappeared at this moment. The moon was still bright in the sky, and the stars were few. Lingjian Peak had somehow regained its tranquility, and the heavenly Tao's power that had been condensing and lingering inexplicably disappeared without a trace. Yang Kai's eyes darted around, looking at Tianyang from time to time. He looked at Wen Zishan, then looked up at the sky, looking a little confused. "Congratulations, Senior." Wen Zishan suddenly spoke, cupping his fists and smiling in the direction of Tianyang. Tianyang also smiled. "It's all thanks to both of your help. This old man thanks both of you." Wen Zishan smiled. "I just used brute force." Senior was able to create a physical body because Yang Kai found the life incarnation pill. Yang Kai said, "Senior, did you succeed?" He also heard some things from the conversation between the two. If Tianyang did not succeed, he would not be so relaxed. Tianyang smiled. It's done. That's great. Yang Kai was overjoyed. It was only now that he released his divine thought to scan Tian Yang's body. At first glance, he could not help but be stunned. This was because the current Tian Yang actually gave him an extremely weak feeling. This kind of weakness was not the kind of weakness that came from a lamp that had run out of oil, but a very natural kind of weakness, or it could be called weakness. Yang Kai did not feel any fluctuations of power from his body. Tian Yang was like an ordinary person who had never cultivated. Senior, you are. Yang Kai looked at him in shock. Tian Yang smiled slightly. The heavenly Tao is not easy to deceive. Even if I can hide it for a while, I can't hide it forever. I can only follow the heavenly Tao. At this moment, I should be equivalent to a newborn baby. Yang Kai opened his mouth wide. This situation was a little different from what he had expected. He originally thought that Tian Yang would still be a master at the level of the great emperors after his physical body was formed. Who knew that the final result would be like this? But thinking about it, how could there be such a good thing in this world? Tian Yang was indeed at the level of the great emperors in the astral ascension world, but that was only for the power of the soul. His physical body was formed by the flesh incarnation pill. Even if he swallowed an endless amount of world energy, it was impossible to reach the level of the great emperors in one go. Thinking of this, Yang Kai felt relieved. He felt that his previous considerations were too naive. When Zishan said, with Senior's foundation, even if you cultivate from the beginning, I'm afraid it won't take long for you to return to your peak. I hope so. Tian Yang chuckled, but before that, this old master needs to stay in the temple for a few days. When Zishan laughed, as long as Senior doesn't mind my temple's simplicity, you can stay as long as you want. Do you need me to arrange a spirit peak for Senior? There's no need. This place is good. I see that little Yang is also a busy person. This place is remote and quiet, suitable for me to rest and recuperate. Moreover, this is the place where this old master was born. Cultivating here is like a baby in its mother's womb. If it were somewhere else, it might be a little uncomfortable. If that's the case, then I'll do as Senior says. I'll have someone send some cultivation materials over tomorrow. If there's anything Senior needs, just let me know. Then send some ancient books over. Anything, the more the better. Okay, then this one will take his leave first. Wen Zishan cupped his fist slightly, then glanced at Yang Kai for a moment before disappearing. Tian Yang turned his head to look at Yang Kai and smiled. You seem a little disappointed. Yang Kai chuckled. It's not that I'm disappointed, but it's a little different from what I expected. Hey, slow down, I'll support you. As he spoke, he walked up and supported Tian Yang, who was about to stand up. Tian Yang was obviously not used to his own body. When he stood up, he staggered a few times. Fortunately, Yang Kai was beside him, otherwise, he would have fallen. As he said, at this moment, he was like a newborn baby who had to learn everything from the beginning. There was a palace on Spirit Sword Peak. Although it was not big, it was enough for 2 people to live in. Yang Kai and Tian Yang chatted as they walked into the palace. After a few steps, Tian Yang suddenly stopped. Yang Kai did not know what he was doing. When he turned his head, he saw that Tian Yang's expression was blank and his eyes were dull, as if he had lost consciousness. Yang Kai was shocked and thought that there was an accident. Just as he was about to investigate, Tian Yang's eyes moved again, and his consciousness returned to his body at this moment. The fusion of body and soul was not very successful. My soul left my body just now, Tian Yang explained, shaking his head in annoyance and walking more carefully. It won't be like this forever, right? Yang Kai asked worriedly. Of course not, it will be fine in a few days. It's just that I'm afraid it will be a little difficult these days. Along the way, they stopped 3 times. Each time, it was because Tian Yang's soul had accidentally left his body. Yang Kai put him in a room with great difficulty, feeling more and more that what Tian Yang said was right. Right now, he was just a newborn baby. The next day, when Zishan sent people to deliver a large number of jade slips with a wide variety of contents. All of them were sent to Tian Yang's room. Tian Yang had not come out of seclusion since yesterday, so Yang Kai did not disturb him. He just flew to the platform at the top of Spirit Sword Peak. With one hand, the mountains and rivers bell flew up. When the roar of a dragon came out, Zhu Lai, who was suppressed in it, suddenly turned into a 20-foot-long dragon. He opened his bloody mouth and bit at Yang Kai. Dragon transformation. Yang Kai stared at him contemptuously, urging the power of the golden divine dragon in his body to display the dragon transformation secret art. His body suddenly grew taller, and a burst of crackling sounds came from his body like beans being fried. A short horn grew on his forehead, and his whole body was covered in scales. The giant dragon that had just arrived in front of him couldn't help but let out a muffled groan as its 20-foot-long body burst like a bubble. Zhu Lai awkwardly appeared in his human form. He had just flown in front of Kai Yang and met Kai Yang's iron fist head-on. It looked like he had taken the initiative to welcome the beating. With a bang, Zhu Lai was sent flying and hit the mountainside of a mountain not far away, sinking more than a few feet. He felt dizzy for a while, and when his vision cleared, he looked up and found that Yang Kai was already standing in front of him. Yang Kai's 4-meter-tall half-dragon body was exuding a strong suppressive force that made him feel uncomfortable. "It seems that you still haven't learned your lesson." Yang Kai sneered, stretched out a dragon claw, and pulled Zhu Lai out of the crack in the rock like a chicken. Zhu Lai struggled hard but to no avail. Such a scene had happened countless times in the past half a month. Every time Yang Kai opened the mountains and rivers bell, Zhu Lai would fiercely sneak attack him, but without that special dragon scale, he could not resist the suppression of Yang Kai's dragon transformation secret art. Even though his real strength was 2 levels higher than Yang Kai's, he was beaten until he could not fight back. Almost every time, it ended with Zhu Lai being beaten up. Chapter 2940. Bang, 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 bang. Yang Kai beat Zhu Lai up in the air like a sandbag. Blood splattered everywhere as Zhu Lai was battered and exhausted. But no matter how badly he was beaten, Zhu Lai never had the thought of admitting defeat or begging for mercy. On the contrary, the harder Yang Kai beat him, the colder his eyes became. It was as if Yang Kai didn't beat him to death, he would definitely repay the pain 100 times over. The pride of the dragon race was evident. Even if Yang Kai transformed into his 4-meter-tall half-dragon form, he was no different from an ant in Zhu Lai's eyes. With another loud bang, Zhu Lai was knocked down from the air and landed heavily on the ground. Before he could bounce back up, Yang Kai had already stepped on his face. "Do you admit defeat?" Yang Kai looked down at him. "If you admit defeat, I'll let you go right now." "No." Zhu Lai gritted his teeth and shouted, "What's the point of relying on bloodline suppression? If you have the guts, let's fight in our human forms." Yang Kai chuckled. "What kind of bullshit theory is that? Don't you dragon race decide who's better and who's worse by bloodline? You're not part of the dragon race." Zhu Lai sneered. "That's not right. In your human form, you have the strength of a 3rd-order Emperor Realm Master. I'm just a 1st-order Emperor Realm Master. If I fight in my human form, wouldn't I be at a huge disadvantage?" Yang Kai kept shaking his head. "Do I need the cultivation of a 3rd-order Emperor Realm Master to deal with trash like you? This dragon will suppress his cultivation to the 1st-order Emperor Realm," Zhu Lai said with a look of disdain. "Oh." Yang Kai raised his eyebrows. "It seems that you're very confident. Let me be frank, what if you can't beat me?" "Can't beat you? That's impossible." Zhu Lai wanted to shake his head, but his head was firmly stepped on by Yang Kai's big foot. He couldn't even shake his head. He could only sneer contemptuously. Under the premise of the same level, no one is a match for the dragon race. "That's hard to say." Yang Kai sneered. "How about this? As you said, we'll both fight in our human forms, no bloodline suppression, but you'll have to suppress your cultivation to the 1st order. If you lose, we'll forget about everything that happened before." "What if you lose?" "Do whatever you want with me." "Are you serious?" Zhu Lai's eyes lit up. "For real?" "All right, if you lose, I want you to return to the Dragon Island with me. Moreover, I want you to kneel down and kowtow to me 3 times. This is a great humiliation for you humans, right?" Yang Kai laughed out loud. "Not to mention 3, even 3,300 are up to you." As he spoke, Yang Kai took a few steps back and released the subdued Zhu Lai. Zhu Lai leaped up. Anger surged on his face, as if he was ready to pounce on Yang Kai for revenge at any time, but he suppressed the impulse in his heart and just said with a cold face, "If you're a man, don't let others look down on you. I hope you can keep your promise." Yang Kai snorted lightly, "You'll have to beat me first." As he finished speaking, he took the initiative to disperse the dragon transformation art. His 4-meter-tall body quickly shrank. He regained his original appearance. At this moment, Zhu Lai rushed over and spat out a mouthful of dragon flame. Although he didn't transform into a giant dragon and couldn't use most of the dragon race's secret techniques, he had no problem spitting out a few mouthfuls of dragon flame. He did keep his promise with Yang Kai and suppressed his cultivation to the First Order Emperor realm, so the power of this mouthful of dragon flame was weaker than when he transformed into a giant dragon. Even so, this kind of dragon flame was not something that just anyone could withstand. It contained an extremely scorching power. After the dragon flame, he threw a punch at Yang Kai with a look of excitement, as if he could already see the scene of Yang Kai being ravaged by him. He didn't put a trivial First Order Emperor Realm Master in his eyes. The reason why he was ravaged by Yang Kai these days was entirely because of the suppression of his bloodline. After Yang Kai used the dragon transformation art, Zhu Lai couldn't even use 70% of his strength, so how could he be his opponent? But the situation was different now. Both of them were in human form, so there was no bloodline suppression. He decided to beat Yang Kai up to vent his anger first, then bring him back to Dragon Island and hand him over to the Great Elder. Zhu Lai's fist arrived first, smashing directly into the dragon flame, and miraculously produced some unexpected changes. Zhu Lai's fist seemed to burn, and not only did it not reduce the power of the dragon flame, but it also increased its power. Rip! A sound was heard. A sword light flashed, and a wide long sword slashed at Zhu Lai's fist, producing an ear-piercing sound of metal clashing. The dragon flame wrapped around Zhu Lai's fist was cut apart and became extremely weak, as if it could be extinguished at any time. What? Zhu Lai was taken aback, and his expression changed slightly. He had been ravaged by Yang Kai these days, so he had some understanding of this human strength. He knew that he was much stronger than an ordinary First Order Emperor Realm Master. He didn't expect his attack to do anything to his opponent, and it was just a test. But he didn't expect his opponent to be able to take it so easily. Looking up, Zhu Lai's expression changed again. Because he found that Yang Kai didn't seem to be struggling at all, and there was a faint smile on his face, as if he was mocking him. Zhu Lai was furious and shouted, "You're just pretending." His other fist blasted forward like a thunderbolt, and it looked like he was going to smash Yang Kai's face into pieces. Yang Kai spun his myriad sword and patted it lightly in front of him, hitting Zhu Lai's second fist. An irresistible force suddenly hit him, and Zhu Lai actually felt pain. This turn of events really made him feel a little incredulous. He was a member of the dragon race, and his physique was as strong as an emperor artifact. But this human's casual attack made him feel pain. How strong did he have to be to do this? Was he a member of the dragon race, or was he a member of the dragon race? While he was hesitating, Yang Kai had already chopped down with his myriad sword with a cold look on his face. A chill came from the top of his head, and Zhu Lai's expression changed drastically as he hurriedly retreated. With a sizzling sound, the myriad sword cut through Zhu Lai's body, and sparks flew everywhere. After Zhu Lai retreated 1,000 meters, he looked down and saw a long white scar from his abdomen to his crotch. It was extremely dazzling. "You should be glad you're a member of the dragon race, or else you would already be dead." Yang Kai's voice came from the front like a ghost. Zhu Lai raised his head and saw that he had unknowingly appeared 15 meters away from him. The wide sword had disappeared, and with a clap and pull of his hands, a 3-meter-long black crescent-like attack suddenly formed and slashed directly at him. Zhu Lai wanted to move, but he found that the space around him had become extremely viscous, giving him the illusion that he had fallen into a swamp. No matter what, he could not avoid such an attack. With a low roar, his aura skyrocketed, and dragon scales appeared on the surface of his body, preparing to take it head-on. The pitch-black crescent blade pierced through the air, causing Zhu Lai's heart to palpitate. He did not know if he could withstand such an attack with his strength. This attack contained very clear fluctuations of space principles, completely condensed from the power of the void. Wherever it passed, even space was swallowed. If such an attack landed on his body, it would likely devour a part of him. For the first time in his life, Zhu Lai felt powerless. Even when he was suppressed by Yang Kai's dragon transformation art, he did not feel this way. Just as Zhu Lai's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets, the crescent blade had already arrived in front of him and shattered with a bang, only an inch away from him. A palpitating feeling of escaping death enveloped his heart and cold sweat dripped down his forehead. Zhu Lai's face was ashen as he looked up at Yang Kai, only to see the other looking at him with a smile. "You lost." Zhu Lai's face darkened and he did not say a word. He had indeed lost, but he had not lost to that crescent blade-like attack. He had lost to himself. In the instant before the crisis, he had raised his strength to the third-layer Emperor realm and displayed some of the characteristics of the dragon race, breaking the agreement between him and Yang Kai. He had not even figured out the true level of Yang Kai when he was not using his dragon transformation art, so he had lost in a daze. An indescribable sense of shame and frustration welled up in his heart, making him look incomparably gloomy. His lips opened and closed a few times, but he was unable to say a single word. The dragon race had always been the one to look down on other creatures, but only now did Zhu Lai realize that there was someone else on the dragon race. "You're not thinking of going back on your word, are you?" Yang Kai cast a sidelong glance at Zhu Lai. "We agreed before that if you lost, our grudges would be written off. Can't you afford to lose the dragon race?" These words provoked Zhu Lai, and his arrogant nature made him respond, "Who said I can't afford to lose? A loss is a loss. Just as you said, the grudge between us is written off." Yang Kai immediately smiled. "That's good, that's good. Ian, since that's the case, you can go back to where you came from. By the way, tell Dragon Island that I will go there when I have time. Don't send people here every few days." Zhu Lai said with a serious face, "I will pass on your words to Dragon Island, but I don't know what decision they will make." Yang Kai nodded. "It's fine. Tell Zhu Qing as well. You two should be able to contact each other, right? Tell her not to look for me in the future, it's very dangerous." Every time he was with Zhu Qing, Yang Kai could not control the throbbing in his blood. The desire hidden in the depths of his heart seemed to be about to erupt at any time. This made him feel very uncomfortable and very dangerous. Yang Kai knew that this was the dragon's nature, and as he cultivated the dragon transformation art, this dragon's nature would become stronger and stronger. One day, he would not be able to suppress this desire. That was why he felt that it was better for Zhu Qing to stay as far away from him as possible. It would be best if she could not contact him at all. "Zhu Qing is probably already dead, I can't pass on your message." Zhu Lai shook his head slowly. The smile on Yang Kai's face slowly disappeared. "What do you mean by probably?" Chapter 2941. Zhu Lai snorted coldly. "It probably means that I'm not sure." "Are you stupid?" Yang Kai opened his mouth, but he was speechless. His mood suddenly became terrible. Zhu Lai looked at him and chuckled. "You care about her very much. Do you want to know her news?" Yang Kai sneered. "I'm not familiar with her. Why should I care about her? Whether she's dead or alive has nothing to do with me. That's your Dragon Island's business. Don't talk nonsense here." Zhu Lai said, "The last time she contacted Dragon Island was 2 months ago. It was because I was sure that she was in danger and most likely to die there that I came out of Dragon Island to find you." "Why are you looking for me?" Yang Kai asked with a sullen face. Zhu Lai said, "Her task was not completed. Naturally, someone needs to complete it for her." He shook his head and sighed. "It just seems that I can't bring you back to Dragon Island. But remember, Dragon Island will not give up. You won't be so lucky next time." Yang Kai coldly snorted. "Go back and tell the dragon race that if anyone dares to disturb this young master again, I'll kill one if one comes, 2 if 2 come, I'll kill both. I just don't know how many dragons there are on your Dragon Island for me to kill." Zhu Lai's face sank. He gritted his teeth and said, "Shameless boasting. Farewell, I won't see you off." Yang Kai flicked his sleeves. He turned and entered Lingjian Peak. Zhu Lai stood in place and stared coldly for a long time. Then his figure shook and turned into a stream of light to fly away. No one intercepted him. Now that the temple was busy with the Demon Slayer order and the search for Wukong, most of the powerhouses in the sect had been dispatched. Naturally, no one would intercept a dragon race. Zhu Lai's speed was very fast. In a moment, he flew out of Azure Sun Temple and just left Azure Sun Mountain Range. Zhu Lai's figure suddenly came to a halt as he stared coldly at a figure in front of him. It was Kai Yang. Zhu Lai didn't know when he ran in front of him. At this moment, he was standing there with his hands behind his back. He was irritated and shouted angrily, "What else do you want? Are you going back on your word? I'm not going to trouble you. If you dare to break your promise, don't be nervous." Yang Kai interrupted him with a cold smile. "I just want to ask how Dragon Island is going to deal with Zhu Qing. Zhu Qing is dead. What else can we do?" Zhu Lai frowned. Yang Kai said, "Didn't you just say that you're not sure? How can you be so sure that she's dead?" Zhu Lai said, "Even if she's not dead, she won't be able to live for long. She went to the frozen earth. You should know how dangerous that place is." "Of course I know. If it wasn't dangerous, I wouldn't have known. A dragon race couldn't have fallen there. I just wanted to ask, isn't your Dragon Island going to save her?" Zhu Lai sneered and said, "She is a rank 8 red dragon. If even she is trapped there, there are not many dragons on the island that can guarantee that they will be able to escape unscathed. Dragon Island will not risk the lives of other dragons just to save a fellow dragon that does not know the difference between life and death." Yang Kai said in a low voice, "Even if she is dead, you should go and collect her body. She is still one of your people." Zhu Lai sneered, "She doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Why should others take the risk with her? If she dies, then so be it. No one will save her. Is this your idea or Dragon Island's idea?" Yang Kai's face was gloomy. "It's my idea. It's also Dragon Island's idea." Zhu Lai tilted his head and didn't look at Yang Kai's eyes. Yang Kai was silent for a long time before he said softly, "I really want to beat you up." Zhu Lai sneered, "Haven't you had enough these days? The shame you gave me, this dragon will definitely return it 100 times in the future. Wait until you can beat me." Yang Kai glanced at him contemptuously, turned around and flew back to Azure Sun Temple. He was extremely fast. In a few breaths, he had returned to Lingjian Peak and went straight to the back of the mountain. Although Lingjian Peak had experienced the demonic will seal breaking, the back of the mountain had not suffered much damage, so the territory crossing space array that he had arranged here was still intact. It wasn't until he stood in front of the space array that Yang Kai suddenly returned to his senses. Just now, his mind was full of other things, and he didn't notice his own movements. When he reacted, he was already here. "Following my heart," Yang Kai whispered softly, and said helplessly, "It's really troublesome." Although he said so, the hesitation on his face disappeared without a trace and was replaced by a firm color. A sound of breaking air quickly came from afar. Yang Kai turned his head and saw a fiery red light flying over. It seemed to have noticed Yang Kai's location and went directly to the back of the mountain and landed not far from him. "What are you doing?" Kai Yang stared at Zhu Lai, who had just returned, looking like he wanted to fight with him. Zhu Lai asked, "Do you want to go to the frozen earth? To find Zhu Qing? It's none of your business." Yang Kai sneered. Zhu Lai's face was a little unnatural. He turned his head and said, "If you want to go, count me in." "Oh." Yang Kai raised his eyebrows and looked at Zhu Lai with interest. He said lightly, "Give me a reason. Don't say that you have found your conscience. I won't believe such a naive reason." Zhu Lai touched his nose and said, "Zhu Qing is my sister." Yang Kai was slightly surprised, but he soon felt relieved. Before, he vaguely felt that there was some blood relationship between Zhu Lai and Zhu Qing because the two had some similarities in appearance. However, he didn't get an answer after he asked once, so he didn't ask anymore. Now he knew that his previous guess was right. These two red dragons were really brother and sister. Is this reason enough? Zhu Lai looked at Yang Kai with a serious expression. "It's enough, it's enough." Yang Kai nodded. He stepped onto the spatial array and said, "Come on up." Zhu Lai frowned. Although he didn't know what Yang Kai was going to do, he didn't feel any malice from him. He was bold and daring, so he jumped onto the array. Don't resist. At the same time that Yang Kai shouted, the laws of space fluctuated. The void seemed to collapse at this moment. If it weren't for Yang Kai's warning, Zhu Lai would definitely resist a little. He might even fall into the endless void because of this. There was a flash of light, and the two disappeared together. At the same time, in the High Heaven Palace of the Northern Territory. At the spatial array, Yang Kai and Zhu Lai appeared at the same time. The two disciples who had been guarding at the side saw them and quickly bowed. Greetings, Palace Master. Yang Kai nodded. He took out the communication compass and poured information into it. After that, he stood at the same spot and waited. Zhu Lai had already recovered from the after effects of teleporting across the territory. He turned his head and looked around. He frowned and said, "Where is this place?" Yang Kai answered without turning his head, "Northern Territory, High Heaven Palace." Zhu Lai was stunned for a moment. Then, he turned his head and looked at the spatial array. He said absent-mindedly, "Zhu Qing said that you have a spatial array across the territory. So it's true." Yang Kai was furious. "Why does that damned woman report everything to the Dragon Island? Do I have no secrets on the Dragon Island?" Zhu Lai said with a sullen face, "Watch your words, human. That's my sister." Yang Kai sneered. "Sister? I didn't see you take the initiative to save your sister. If I had a brother like you, I would have strangled him to death. What's the use of having him? What do you know?" He didn't know that Yang Kai's words had touched Zhu Lai's sensitive nerves. He was furious in an instant. He gritted his teeth and said, "Do you think I don't want to save her? Do you think I want to see her die there? Then why don't you go? As a cultivator, we should follow our heart and move forward bravely. We are afraid of being overcautious and indecisive. If she is really your sister, you shouldn't go to the Azure Sun Temple to find me. You should go to the frozen earth to find her. Even if you die, you should die with her. Now that time is delayed, maybe her only chance of survival was cut off by you." Zhu Lai's lips opened and closed. He seemed to be extremely angry. Both of his eyes were about to spit fire. But for some reason, he suddenly gave up and became dejected. He sighed and said, "What the heart moves, what the body moves. Is this why you want to save her?" Yang Kai curled his lips and said, "What else? I'm not close enough with her to risk my life to save her. I can't wait for her to die as soon as possible. Since I have the thought of saving her, if I don't act on it, I'm afraid this thought will linger in my heart and become a heart demon in the future." Zhu Lai said, "No matter what, I thank you on behalf of Zhu Qing. No need to thank me. Just don't bother me in the future." Yang Kai snorted coldly. A beautiful figure flew over and landed in front of them. It was the chief steward of the High Heaven Palace, Hua Qing Sai. She cupped her fists and said, "Palace Master, you are back." While speaking, she glanced curiously at Zhu Lai, who was standing beside Yang Kai, but didn't ask much. Zhu Lai was naturally too lazy to say anything. The dragon race was a proud race. If he hadn't suffered so much at the hands of Yang Kai before, he wouldn't look at Yang Kai differently at this moment. "We are leaving immediately." Yang Kai had an energetic expression. "Where are you going?" Hua Qing Sai asked. "I have to make a trip to the Fire Dragon Palace." "Have we connected to the space array at the Fire Dragon Palace?" Hua Qing Sai replied, "I did have this suggestion before, but Li Jiao wasn't too willing, so I didn't force him." "Of course he wasn't willing." Yang Kai smiled and said. Although the Fire Dragon Palace and the High Sky Sect were old top sects in the Northern Territory, they had all suffered great losses at the hands of Yang Kai. They owed the High Heaven Palace a huge debt that couldn't be paid off even after a few decades. Who would be willing to connect to the space array with their creditors? Wouldn't this make it easier for others to come and collect their debts? "Fine, I will just fly over directly. Point me in a direction." Hua Qing Sai hurriedly pointed in a direction and said, "The Fire Dragon Palace is over there. Palace Master, you can reach it in about 3 days. Would you like me to accompany Palace Master? I've been to the Fire Dragon Palace once before." "No need." Yang Kai waved his hand and changed to a sound transmission, How are things going with the Thousand Illusions dream world? Hua Qing Sai's expression turned serious. It's all been dealt with. Kai Yu and the others entered once and gained quite a bit from it. However, the scale of the Thousand Illusions dream world is too large, so it will take some time to figure out a pattern. I'm preparing to send some of the Thousand Leaves sect's disciples in the next batch to enter. Chapter 2942. More than half a month ago, when the Southern Gate army returned to the High Heaven Palace from the Azure Sun Temple, Yang Kai gave him the Thousand Illusionary Butterfly. Yang Kai attached great importance to the Thousand Illusionary Butterfly because he had benefited a lot from the Thousand Illusionary Dream World. The Thousand Illusionary Dream World would definitely become the foundation of the High Heaven Palace. Compared to it, the Heavenly Sound Temple with the Heavenly Sound Treasure Box as the hub was much less useful. However, the Thousand Illusionary Dream World was not unchanging. Every cultivator who entered it might encounter different illusions. The illusions were enough to pass off as real, but they were born from reality. It was hard to distinguish between the real and the fake. However, the benefits obtained from the illusions could improve the cultivator by a lot. Especially the Thousand Illusionary Dream World's magical effect of extending time, which was very precious. Kai Yu and the others were Yang Kai's friends and relatives, so Hua Qing Sai chose them as the first batch to enter the Thousand Illusionary Dream World. Facts proved that each of them had gained something from the Thousand Illusionary Dream World. The Thousand Illusionary Dream World was a huge treasure. It was impossible to extract it all at once. It could only be explored step by step. After chatting with Hua Qing Sai for a while, Yang Kai and Zhu Lai set off. The flowing cloud shuttle was extremely fast. One man and one dragon flew through the air. Zhu Lai was puzzled by Yang Kai's behavior. Zhu Qing is trapped in the frozen earth. Why do you want to go to the Fire Dragon Palace? Yang Kai looked at him while controlling the flowing cloud shuttle and asked, "Have you been to the frozen earth?" Zhu Lai shook his head. "Since I was born, I have rarely left the Dragon Island. The dragon race is not allowed to appear outside often. I have only heard of the frozen earth. I have never been there." "I haven't been there either." Yang Kai chuckled. He asked again, "Then do you know where to find your sister?" Zhu Lai continued to shake his head. "I don't know. I have been trying to contact her these days, but I haven't gotten a response. I'm afraid she is really." Yang Kai said, "If she is alive, I want to see her. If she is dead, I want to see her corpse. Don't jump to conclusions before seeing her." That being said, "But, no buts." Yang Kai glanced over at him sharply. "You and I have never been to the frozen earth, let alone know where to find your sister. But there is one person who can help." Zhu Lai thought for a moment and asked, "Is that person in the mythical dragon palace?" "You are quite smart." Yang Kai grinned. "If you want to do a good job, you must first sharpen your tools. Although going to Li Long Palace to find that person will take some time, it's better than blindly searching for him in the frozen earth." After a pause, Yang Kai continued, "But that person's status is somewhat unusual, so I may need your help when the time comes." Zhu Lai. Yang Kai shook his head. "It's not a matter of who is strong or weak, it's a matter of courage. I want that person to accompany me to the frozen earth, but he will not be willing. If I use force, I am afraid I will have to shed all pretense of cordiality with him. It will not be beneficial to finding your sister, but if you can come forward, things may be easier to deal with." "Oh." Zhu Lai was curious. He didn't know what kind of person Kai Yang was talking about, but he didn't ask too much. In any case, he would know when they met. Fire Dragon Palace. It had been established for more than 10,000 years. In the Northern Territory, it was once one of the top 4 sects, along with Iceheart Valley, Seeking Passion Sect, and High Sky Sect, because each of these 4 sects had a third-stage Emperor Realm Master. Fire Dragon Palace's Palace Master, Li Jiao, was a half-monster master with a trace of the dragon race's bloodline. In its heyday, Fire Dragon Palace once suppressed the other 3 sects. However, after the High Heaven Palace appeared in the Northern Territory, Fire Dragon Palace's days were not so good. No one knew how their palace master offended High Heaven Palace. Since last year, 80% of the sect's annual income had to be handed over to High Heaven Palace, leaving them with only 20%. Fire Dragon Palace was a big family with tens of thousands of disciples. A mere 20% of the sect's income was only 10 million high-rank source crystals. How could this amount be enough? In the palace, from Li Jiao to the ordinary disciples, all kinds of benefits fell from the sky to the ground. Everyone had to tighten their belts to live. Because of this matter, many elders in the mythical Dragon Palace were extremely dissatisfied with the Lingxiao Palace. From time to time, they would blow wind and ignite the fire in Li Jiao's ears, wanting him to bring them to the Lingxiao Palace to wash away their shame and take revenge. Li Jiao didn't have the guts. The elders and disciples below didn't know the background of High Heaven Palace, but he was very clear about it. Last time, he went with Ji Ying to join in the fun, but the result was that he almost lost his family business. Now, when he heard others mention High Heaven Palace, his heart would beat like a drum. How could he dare to visit? Fortunately, the Fire Dragon Palace wasn't the only one who was unlucky. The High Sky sect's situation was similar. The two top sects were now brothers in distress, so they could only hug each other for warmth. On this day, in the Fire Dragon Palace's main hall, many elders gathered. As usual, the hall was noisy. Many people in the Emperor realm didn't have the corresponding cultivation and calm temperament. The entire main hall was as noisy as a market. This situation wasn't common in the past, but since last year, it often happened. Many elders couldn't compete for more than one thing: benefit. The Fire Dragon Palace's annual income was about 50 million high-rank source crystals. With such a large amount of income, if there weren't any special circumstances, the entire sect would definitely not be able to spend it all. It was enough to satisfy the needs of every elder, and there was still some left over to expand the sect's inventory for future needs. But since last year, the number of 50 million had plummeted to 10 million, and the problem was exposed. Every elder wanted to fight for more benefits for the Spirit Peak Hall they controlled. Alchemy required source crystals, artifact refining required source crystals, and cultivation required source crystals. Who would be willing to suffer losses? But there were only 10 million source crystals in total, and they had to be maintained for a year, so when it was distributed to the subordinates, it became even rarer. If there was still some left in the sect's storehouse, it would be fine. At worst, they could open the sect's storehouse and transfer source crystals to alleviate the crisis, but the problem was that the Fire Dragon Palace's storehouse was basically empty. The sect's many years of accumulation had already been given to the High Heaven Palace as repayment for the debt, and there wouldn't be any improvement in the next 50 years. Because of this, the elders gathered in the main hall were naturally more and more unwilling to take half a step back. All of them were arguing until their faces were red with anger, wanting to fight for the greatest benefits for their side. Li Jiao sat at the head of the table, listening to the noise with a gloomy expression. He didn't say a word, nor did he have any intention of stopping them. He only hated himself for going to the High Heaven Palace with Ji Ying. Even if he went, he actually made a bet with Yang Kai. Not only did he make a bet, but he also bet so much of his sect's business. He was obsessed. Li Jiao sighed and slowly closed his eyes. At some point, the noise below stopped, and an old man with white hair and beard cupped his fists and said, "Palace Master, the disciples' cultivation cannot be separated from pills. The operation of my alchemy room is the most important thing for the entire sect. I ask Sect Master to allocate 3 million high-rank source crystals as the alchemy room's expenses for this year. 3 million? Elder Shu, aren't you being too greedy? The palace only has 10 million source crystals available every year, yet you want 3 million at once. What do you want us to do? Drink the northwest wind? Yeah, 3 million is too much. I think 500,000 is enough. Even without pills, we can still cultivate. It's just that our cultivation speed will be a bit slower. We'll just have to endure these 50 years. 50 years? After 50 years, the younger generation will be crippled. Without enough pills to support them, how will they be able to dig out their potential? There will definitely be a huge gap in the younger generation of my Fire Dragon Palace. When the time comes for the sect to weaken, who will be able to bear this responsibility? Brother Shu, don't be so serious. It's only 50 years, which one of us hasn't cultivated for thousands of years? Did you already have plenty of pills when you were young? Didn't you still cultivate to the Emperor realm? That's why this old master is only at the first order. If I had enough pills when I was young, this old master would definitely not be at this level. After a short period of calm, a new round of quarreling broke out. Li Jiao finally couldn't bear it anymore and angrily slapped the chair he was sitting on, turning it into dust. The noisy hall suddenly quieted down as pairs of eyes focused on Li Jiao. Since the palace master was angry, they didn't dare to be presumptuous anymore. Enough. Li Jiao's eyes swept over the crowd as he lightly gritted his teeth and said, "Every day, I hear you all make a ruckus here, but you still can't come up with a solution. You are all elders of my fire dragon palace, the Emperor realm. If you all make such a ruckus here, where is your dignity?" Everyone was embarrassed by the scolding and lowered their heads. Elder Shu from the pill room pondered for a moment before saying, "Palace Master, the source crystals need to be solved as soon as possible, otherwise, do you think I don't know?" Li Jiao glared at him angrily. This king was negligent that day and fell into the trap of that little thief, implicating everyone in my fire dragon palace. Elder Shu said, "Palace Master doesn't need to blame himself too much. Sect Master Mi also didn't see any flaws that day. You can only blame that little brat from High Heaven Palace for being too cunning. As long as the Palace Master of my Fire Dragon Palace still exists, there will be a day when we can make a comeback." The group of elders nodded in agreement. Li Jiao said, "In short, things have already come to this. This king has a proposal that I hope the elders can do their best to cooperate with. If it can be carried out, my Fire Dragon Palace will definitely be able to overcome this crisis." Elder Shu said, "What kind of brilliant plan does Palace Master have?" Li Jiao looked around and lightly coughed before saying, "Everyone here is from the Emperor realm and has been an elder of my Fire Dragon Palace for more than a year or two, so you all must have some savings on hand. This king means, everyone should first take out your savings and use it for public use. Even if the palace borrows it from you, after 50 years, we will return it to you with interest. We definitely won't let you suffer a loss. What do you all think?" No one responded. Wherever Li Jiao's gaze passed, everyone lowered their heads. Li Jiao coldly snorted, "You all don't have any savings? Could it be that everyone in my Fire Dragon Palace is poor?" Chapter 2943. It's not that we don't have any savings, but compared to the sect's lack of funds, it's just a drop in the bucket, Palace Master. Elder Shu looked at Li Jiao timidly with a troubled expression. "That's right, Palace Master, even if we old fellows take out all our savings, we won't be able to last long. We'll hold on for as long as we can." Li Jiao persuaded earnestly, "We'll just have to get through this temporary crisis. Once the sect has enough funds, we won't be short of you." Since Li Jiao had said so, the elders were too embarrassed to continue to refuse. After all, what Li Jiao said was true. Everyone had been promoted to the Emperor realm for so long and had some savings on hand. If they could take out this amount, it could indeed alleviate the sect's crisis. Everyone looked at each other, but Elder Shu was the first to speak. "Sect Master's words are reasonable. Since that's the case, this old master will set an example. This old master will contribute 5 million. Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard this, and Li Jiao stared at him with a burning gaze. Elder Shu smiled awkwardly. "Mid-rank source crystals. This is almost all this old master has." Li Jiao's face suddenly darkened. 5 million mid-rank source crystals was equivalent to 50,000 high-rank source crystals. What could he do with such a small amount? Moreover, it was impossible for an elder of the Emperor realm who had been in charge of pill recipes for over 100 years to only have so little. "That's not right, Elder Shu." A burly man with a dark face jumped out and shouted, "I saw that the 10,000 flower wine you served to guests a few days ago cost 30,000 high-rank source crystals. That is a top-grade wine from Medicine Pill Valley. If you only have so little money, how could you possibly afford it?" He was exposed right in front of his face. Elder Shu's face flushed red. He tried to defend himself. That wasn't what this old master bought. It was brought by my friend who specially invited this old master to taste it together. How could it be that I bought it? This old master's elder contribution is only so little every year. and it's barely enough for my own cultivation. How could I have so many source crystals to buy some 10,000 flower wine? Don't slander me. The burly man with a dark face coldly snorted, Elder Shu doesn't have source crystals? Who would believe that? Elder Shu, you are in control of the entire Fire Dragon Palace's alchemy room. Every year, countless source crystals were taken from the palace master. Not to mention anything else, just the year before last, they had taken 6 million high-rank source crystals, 7 million 3 years ago, and 8 million before that. The sect's annual income is no more than 50 million, and the alchemy room directly consumes 10% to 20% of that. Elder Shu flicked his sleeves and said, "This old man has already said that the pill chamber is the most important place in the Fire Dragon Palace. Among the tens of thousands of disciples who cultivate, which one of them can do without pills? It's normal to consume a lot of energy." The black-faced big man sneered, "If those source crystals were really all used to buy herbs, then so be it. Can Elder Shu guarantee that the source crystals you asked for from the palace master were all used to operate the pill room?" Elder Shu was instantly enraged. He shouted, What do you mean?" The black-faced man snorted, "You know what I mean. When the sect was rich, you secretly embezzled and filled your own pockets. Now that the sect is in trouble, shouldn't Elder Shu do something? Embezzling and filling my own pockets." Elder Shu suddenly jumped up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. His emperor chi surged. It was obvious that he wanted to immediately fight with the black-faced man to prove his innocence. Turning his head to Li Jiao, he angrily said, "Palace Master, someone is slandering this old man. I ask Palace Master to uphold justice for me." Li Jiao stood there with a numb expression, as if he did not hear Elder Shu's words. Elder Shu turned his head and sneered at the black-faced man, "My pill chamber's financial income and expenditure are all in the books. This old master will not argue with you here. Whether or not I secretly embezzled and filled my own pockets is up to Palace Master to decide. As for your artifact chamber, I don't know if it's clean. Old thing, how dare you bite back?" The black-faced man flew into a rage. "How dare you call me old thing? Bastard! So what if I call you old thing, old thing, old thing?" The two immediately quarreled fiercely. Some of the remaining elders wanted to help, while others wanted to keep the peace. The hall instantly fell into chaos, and if it weren't for Li Jiao still being here, a fight would have broken out already. Li Jiao coldly looked down, wishing he could sweep all these annoying people out of the hall and end this once and for all. However, he was still the palace master, and his decision was related to the survival of tens of thousands of disciples. Even if he was angry in his heart, he could only forcibly suppress it and think of a way to solve the current crisis first. With a creak, the door to the hall was pushed open and a disciple walked in. The noise came to an abrupt end as everyone turned to look at the disciple. This disciple obviously didn't expect such a wonderful thing to happen in the main hall. What he saw was that the high and mighty elders were all flushed with anger, and the palace master was standing at the very top with a sneer on his face. He was so scared that he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. "What's the matter?" Li Jiao asked impatiently. Reporting to palace master, "Someone wants to see you," the disciple replied while trembling with fear. "I won't see him." Li Jiao's mood was in a mess, so he refused without thinking. The disciple felt as if he had been pardoned and quickly withdrew. However, Li Jiao opened his mouth again and said, "Who wants to see you?" The disciple thought for a moment and said, "That person calls himself Yang Kai." "What?" Li Jiao was shocked when he heard this, and the group of elders below were also stunned. Elder Shu said, "Yang Kai? Could it be the High Heaven Palace's palace master? If it really is him, then it will be interesting." The eyes of the black-faced man who was quarreling with Elder Shu just now flashed with a dangerous light. He raised his head and said, "Palace Master, why don't you let that Yang Kai come in? Isn't he the creditor of our Fire Dragon Palace? We can discuss the debt with him." Yes. This person came at the right time. Let him come in, Palace Master, what do you think?" Everyone turned their heads and saw Li Jiao's face as black as the bottom of a pot. Obviously, he didn't think their idea was a good one. Li Jiao sighed and said, "High Heaven Palace can't be provoked, and that Yang Kai, can't be provoked either. The group of elders was very unconvinced because they had heard that the High Heaven Palace's palace master was only a first-order Emperor Realm Master. Last time, their own palace master and the High Sky Sect master had suffered a big loss in their territory. This time, he dared to take the initiative to deliver himself to their door. They really didn't know what their palace master was afraid of. As long as he entered the hall and closed the door, the huge debt would be settled in an instant. Tell that person that this palace master is out traveling and is not in the palace. Li Jiao waved his hand. The disciple nodded, but just as he was about to turn around, a sneer suddenly came from outside the door. Brother Li is really arrogant. This palace master has personally come to visit, but you don't even want to see his face. As soon as he finished speaking, two more figures appeared in the hall. Before these two people appeared, no one in the Emperor realm in the hall noticed them, as if they had always been there. Both of them were young men. One had a frivolous expression, sharp eyebrows, and bright eyes, while the other had fiery red hair, a cold expression, and arrogant eyes. He was clearly standing on the ground, but he gave off a feeling of being in the clouds, as if he wasn't in the same world as everyone present. All the elders were shocked and their faces paled. Li Jiao's figure flickered and he almost turned around to flee, but he suppressed the conflict in his heart with great difficulty and looked at Yang Kai speechlessly. Yang Kai looked up with a smile. Brother Li wants to go out traveling? Li Jiao chuckled dryly. I do have such plans, but it's not a big deal. It's just a whim, but since Palace Master Yang is here, this Li naturally can't leave. Yang Kai rubbed his chin and said, still in the mood to go out traveling, it seems that Palace Master Li is doing quite well these days. Li Jiao's expression suddenly became bitter as he said, Palace Master Yang must be joking, this Li's days are worse than death. Hearing this, the group of elders lowered their heads in embarrassment. Yang Kai laughed and said, Brother Li is really interesting. Fire Dragon Palace is a big family and Brother Li's authority is monstrous, so how could you be living a life worse than death? Li Jiao thought to himself, isn't it all because of you? But he still smiled and said, I wonder why Palace Master Yang has come here today? Yang Kai didn't answer and just looked at him with a smile. Li Jiao wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and said, This. Palace Master Yang isn't here to collect money, right? How could such a small matter trouble you personally? Just let the servants do it, and my Fire Dragon Palace hasn't forgotten about this year's payment, so I need some time to prepare it. Once it's ready, I will immediately send it to High Heaven Palace without any delay. What's more, it's not the deadline yet. When is the deadline? How come I don't know? I feel that today is the deadline. The cold sweat on Li Jiao's forehead became even more severe. Palace Master Yang is really here to collect money? He simply couldn't believe it. Although the Fire Dragon Palace did owe a large amount of source crystals to High Heaven Palace, Yang Kai personally coming to collect it and entering without notice was a bit excessive. Surnamed Yang, don't be so arrogant. The dark-faced man rushed out from the crowd and poked Yang Kai with his finger. Although I don't know what means you used to deceive the palace master and cause my Li Long Dragon Palace to be in such dire straits, but since you are still the palace master of the Li Long Dragon Palace and a comrade of the Northern Territory, in the future, we will surely meet again. As long as you can sign a written agreement here, the debt between our two sects will be nullified and we can let you go, but if not, mate. Many people from the Emperor realm looked at Yang Kai with ill intentions. After seeing Yang Kai with their own eyes and confirming that he was really just a first-order Emperor realm master, they naturally had nothing to be afraid of. No matter how strong the High Heaven Palace's heritage was, as long as they could control Yang Kai here, it was equivalent to controlling the High Heaven Palace. The so-called debt would be a joke. Li Jiao sweated profusely and almost fainted. Yang Kai glanced at the dark-faced man, then looked at Li Jiao and asked, Is this your elder? No. Li Jiao immediately denied. Chapter 2944. The group of people from the Emperor realm stared at him dumbfoundedly. The dark-faced man obviously didn't expect his palace master to give such an answer, his mouth wide open and his expression sluggish. Li Jiao said, I don't know when this piece of trash got in here, but he dared to pretend to be an elder of my Fire Dragon Palace. Master Yang, please don't lower yourself to his level. Yang Kai said coldly, since his trash, he should be cleaned up. Li Jiao hurriedly said, Palace Master Yang is right. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and slammed it towards the dark-faced man, instantly stirring up a storm in the hall. When the huge palm fell, the dark-faced man obviously didn't react, but even if he did, with his first-order Emperor realm cultivation, it was impossible for him to be Li Jiao's opponent. With a scream, the dark-faced man was slammed to the ground, his bones broken, blood flowing from his mouth and nose as he fainted. The hall was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. All the Fire Dragon Palace elders were dumbfounded. They never thought that their palace master would actually attack an elder of his own family. For a moment, their hearts and bodies turned cold. Li Jiao wasn't a temperamental person. Every elder of the Emperor realm present had followed him for at least 100 years and had contributed greatly to the Fire Dragon Palace. However, in order to please an outsider, Li Jiao actually attacked his own family. This kind of action inevitably made them feel disheartened. Even if the dark-faced man didn't die from this blow, he was seriously injured and would need at least 1 to 2 months to recover. Under everyone's gazes, Li Jiao raised his hand again and directly threw the dark-faced man out of the hall. He looked around coldly and sternly. Snorting lightly, he said, If you don't have eyes at home, you'll only lose your face, but if you don't have eyes outside, you'll lose your life. I hope you all remember this. When these words of warning reached everyone's ears, they couldn't help but shiver, and their expressions changed. Li Jiao turned his head and looked at Yang Kai with a dry smile. I wonder if Palace Master Yang is satisfied. Yang Kai chuckled, Brother Li is handling his own family's matters. It doesn't matter if I'm satisfied or not. Only then did Li Jiao feel relieved. Exhaling lightly, he asked, May I ask why Palace Master Yang is here? Yang Kai smiled and said, Collect the money. Didn't Brother Li guess it? Why ask when you already know the answer? Li Jiao turned pale with fright as he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Palace Master Yang, please don't joke, please don't joke. Do I look like I'm joking? Yang Kai looked at him indifferently. Li Jiao wasn't sure why Yang Kai had come here. Logically speaking, the annual debt of 40 million high-rank source crystals really wasn't worth Yang Kai coming here personally, but his expression didn't seem to be joking. This made Li Jiao's heart beat like a drum. Owing such a huge sum of money to the other party, he always felt that he was inferior to the other party. He didn't even have the confidence to speak. If the High Heaven Palace didn't have such a huge background, the Fire Dragon Palace might have resisted a little. However, Li Jiao, who knew the background of the High Heaven Palace, couldn't even think of resisting. The other party had a relationship with Grandmaster Ji Ying. Not to mention, there were 3 monster kings. There was even a dragon race. How could the Fire Dragon Palace compare with such a lineup? If he really provoked the other party, the Seeking Passion sect's fate would be the Fire Dragon Palace's tomorrow. For a moment, Li Jiao smiled, not knowing what to do. Yang Kai suddenly said, Brother Li, you can't take it out? Li Jiao said embarrassedly, I ask Palace Master Yang to extend the deadline for a few more days. How long is the deadline? Half a year. No, 3 months. 3 months will do, Li Jiao hurriedly said. 3 months. Palace Master Li's request is too low. Yang Kai smiled slightly and said, How about this Palace Master give you 3 years? What? Li Jiao was stunned, not understanding Yang Kai's meaning. Yang Kai said, This Palace Master will give you 3 years. During these 3 years, your Fire Dragon Palace will no longer need to pay tribute to my High Heaven Palace. After 3 years, everything will return to normal. With these 3 years as a buffer, your days in the Fire Dragon Palace should be much better. Li Jiao didn't feel pleasantly surprised. Instead, he looked frightened and hesitantly asked, Palace Master Yang, what request do you have? There was no free lunch in this world, and it was impossible for the High Heaven Palace's Palace Master to be so kind. Li Jiao had lived for so many years, so he should have some common sense. Yang Kai smiled gently, I need Brother Li to accompany me to a place. Li Jiao immediately became vigilant, his expression constantly changing. Where? Yang Kai quietly sent a message and spat out 2 words. Li Jiao's expression changed greatly, as if he had heard some shocking bad news. He shook his head like a rattledrum. Palace Master Yang, it's not that this Li doesn't want to help you, it's just that, then pay me back right now. Yang Kai didn't wait for him to finish speaking and stretched out his hand. The corner of Li Jiao's mouth twitched as he angrily said, Palace Master Yang, this Li treats you sincerely, so don't go too far. I, Li Jiao, am not someone who can be scared. Yang Kai smiled and said, why is Brother Li so unreasonable? I just want you to accompany me to that place, not take your life. Li Jiao shook his head and said, anywhere else is fine, but that place. He seemed to have thought of something in the past and couldn't help but shiver before continuing. Palace Master Yang, if you have any other requests, this Li will definitely satisfy you if I can. You really can't. Yang Kai's face sank slightly. Li Jiao answered with silence. Yang Kai sighed slightly and said, forget it, a melon forcefully picked is not sweet. Since Brother Li is unwilling, then this palace master won't force it. It's just that this palace master originally planned to resolve a crisis for Brother Li, but since Brother Li is unwilling to cooperate, then you can only pray for yourself. Li Jiao's heart skipped a beat as he asked in surprise, crisis? What crisis? Yang Kai shrugged. Zhu Lai, who had been standing silently to the side, said, does this guy know where Zhu Qing is? No one knows better than him, Yang Kai replied. The reason why Zhu Qing had gone to the frozen earth was because of this Li Jiao. Many years ago, Li Jiao had accidentally obtained a dragon blood flower from the frozen earth and brought it back to the Fire Dragon Palace to cultivate with his own blood. According to him, the reason why the dragon blood flower appeared in the frozen earth was because a giant dragon had fallen there, and the dragon blood flower had absorbed the essence of that giant dragon's flesh and blood, allowing it to survive. Zhu Qing had previously inquired about the location of that place from Li Jiao and had gone to the frozen earth in order to bring back the dragon race's source left behind by the giant dragon. So, if there was anyone in this world who knew where Zhu Qing was in the frozen earth, then only Li Jiao would know. Letting him lead the way was the fastest way. That's good. Zhu Lai nodded when he heard this and walked towards Li Jiao. Li Jiao's heart tightened as he felt an inexplicable sense of crisis. He had been paying attention to this red-haired young man before and had sensed his strength, so he had tolerated Yang Kai's deliberately making things difficult for him. Now that there was a disagreement, Li Jiao naturally became even more vigilant. He asked in a deep voice, how should I address sir? Zhu Lai sneered, reptile is not qualified to know my name. Reptile, reptile. Li Jiao flew into a rage. He was afraid of Yang Kai because there were countless masters behind Yang Kai that he could not afford to provoke, especially that female dragon. That was an existence he could not look up to. Although this red-haired young man was powerful, it was not to the extent that he feared him. He was still a third-layer Emperor Realm Master, and there were not many people in this world who could defeat him. I can't stand a despicable bloodline like yours. It should have been exterminated long ago. Zhu Lai's eyes were filled with disdain. This sentence completely angered Li Jiao. His impure bloodline was a thorn in his heart, and anyone who mentioned it would be unlucky. So with a roar, Li Jiao prepared to teach this red-haired young man a lesson. No matter how strong the other party was, as long as they were not great emperors, they would not be his opponent in this Fire Dragon Palace. He had the advantage of time, place, and people, so he could display a strength far greater than his own. The roar came to an abrupt end, and the Emperor Qi surging in Li Jiao's body also calmed down. Standing on the high platform, Li Jiao looked down with trembling eyes, his whole body trembling as he almost fell to the ground, exclaiming, Dragon Race. Below, behind Zhu Lai, who was walking towards him step by step, a giant red dragon phantom suddenly appeared, hovering above his head, its huge dragon eyes staring emotionlessly at Li Jiao. Being stared at by this pair of eyes, Li Jiao felt all the strength in his body disappear, his blood almost solidifying, and his Emperor Qi not circulating properly. Now, even if a Dao Source Realm cultivator appeared, they would be able to easily kill him on the spot. A resounding dragon roar rang out at this time, deafening everyone, causing the entire hall to tremble. The faces of the many elders of the Li Dragon Palace turned ashen as they panicked for a while. All of them stared at the gigantic dragon figure behind Zhu Lai in a daze, and couldn't help but feel a sense of inferiority and insignificance in their hearts. It was only at this moment that they realized how wise and powerful their palace lord was. When Li Jiao had knocked out the large dark-faced man and tossed him out, they had felt that their palace master was a bit heartless, and their hearts had turned cold. But now, they understood that it wasn't that Li Jiao was a coward, but that he had foresight. Not to mention the strength of the High Heaven Palace's palace master, just this dragon race was enough to wipe out everyone present. If there was any conflict at that time, only the Fire Dragon Palace would be unlucky. A dragon race, a real dragon race, a dragon race that had always only existed in legends and ancient books, had suddenly appeared in front of them, giving everyone an extremely unreal feeling. Only after witnessing it with their own eyes did they understand how weak the descriptions in ancient books were. The strength of the dragon race was not something that could be summarized in a few words. When the dragon race was angry, who could face it head-on? Clashing with the dragon race was tantamount to going against the entire Dragon Island. The Fire Dragon Palace did not have the courage or ability to do so. In the blink of an eye, Zhu Lai had already walked up to the high platform, reached out, and grabbed Li Jiao's neck, lifting him up. Despite his third-stage Emperor realm cultivation, Li Jiao was like a baby in front of Zhu Lai, completely unable to resist. Although he struggled, he still couldn't break free from his shackles, his face quickly turning red and his breathing labored. Chapter 2945. Save. Save me. Li Jiao couldn't break free from Zhu Lai's restraint, he only felt that his neck was about to be crushed. The cold murderous intent in Zhu Lai's eyes made him even more terrified. He could only tilt his head and ask Yang Kai for help. Since the two of them came together, then Yang Kai's words must have some weight. Yang Kai shrugged and said, "Brother Li, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this matter." Li Jiao's throat made a gurgling sound, he was already unable to spit out a word. The group of Fire Dragon Palace elders were even more anxious, they couldn't do anything as they watched their own palace master being humiliated like this, they couldn't do anything, it was extremely awkward. "I forgot to tell you, this dragon race is Zhu Qing's younger brother, he also came from Dragon Island. Do you still remember Zhu Qing? She is the female dragon that went to that place. Speaking of this matter, Brother Li also has to bear a lot of responsibility." Yang Kai let out a long sigh. Zhu Qing went to that place and hasn't returned yet, she seems to have encountered some danger. Then, her younger brother came out from Dragon Island, wanting to save his sister. TSK, the affection between siblings is really touching. However, when he found out that this matter was caused by you, his impression of Brother Li isn't too good. Li Jiao's eyeballs were about to roll out, leaving only white kernels. "Ah, that's right." Yang Kai continued to pour oil on the fire. "This brother seems to dislike those with impure bloodlines, he kills one when he sees one, two when he sees two. I did mention Brother Li's situation to him before, I don't know if he listened to me. In short, this is a matter between Dragon Island and your Fire Dragon Palace, it's really inconvenient for an outsider like me to interfere." Until now, Li Jiao finally understood what Yang Kai meant by crisis. This was indeed a huge crisis. He couldn't understand even if he racked his brain. The dragon race was rarely seen by ordinary people, why would one appear in front of him every few days, and it was all related to this High Heaven Palace's palace master. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Dragon Island was behind Lingxiao Palace. In this situation, even if this dragon race really killed him, he had no one to reason with, let alone count on his subordinates to avenge him. He wanted to speak. However, no matter what, he couldn't spit out a single word. Left with no choice, he could only raise one hand and raise 3 fingers, continuously shaking them. "Brother Li, what do you mean? I don't understand your hand signals." Yang Kai was at a loss. Li Jiao continued to sway. Yang Kai turned a deaf ear to him. The 3 fingers turned into 2, and finally, it turned into 1. Only then did Kai Yang say, "I understand a little. Since Brother Li is so sincere, I think it's not impossible to discuss." He turned to Zhu Lai and said, "Let him go first. If you really kill him, don't expect to find your sister." Zhu Lai coldly snorted and threw Li Jiao out like a rag sack. There was a loud boom. Li Jiao fell heavily to the side and rolled a few times before stabilizing himself. He hurriedly got up and coughed violently. After stabilizing himself with great difficulty, he didn't even have the courage to look at Zhu Lai, avoiding his gaze. He was terrified to the extreme. If it had been any other third-layer Emperor Realm cultivator here, he wouldn't have behaved so miserably, but facing a pure Dragon Clan cultivator, he couldn't muster up any thoughts of resistance or resentment. He only felt that he was inferior in every way and deserved to be abused. "Brother Li, there's no time to lose. We have to set off now," Yang Kai looked at Li Jiao and said. Li Jiao nodded weakly. Yang Kai smiled, "Don't look so wronged. I don't want your life, I just want you to lead the way. What's more, it's not like you didn't earn anything. This palace master can give you a year to repay the debt." Li Jiao's mouth twitched as he regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. If he had known that Yang Kai would bring a dragon race over, he would have agreed to everything and wouldn't have haggled with him. Now, the original 3-year deadline had been reduced to 1 year, and it was he who asked for it. Li Jiao turned around and ordered the people of the Emperor Realm, "I ask everyone to take care of the palace. This Li will be back soon." All the elders nodded and looked at Li Jiao sympathetically. They also knew about Li Jiao's situation and knew that he wasn't a coward. It was just that he had encountered a nemesis and couldn't do anything about it. Embarrassed to stay any longer, Li Jiao urged Yang Kai to hurry up and set off. Summoning the flowing cloud shuttle, the three entered and turned into a streak of light as they rushed north. Among the 4 great territories of the star boundary, every territory had its own dangerous and forbidden areas. The southern territory had the southern swamp, the eastern territory had the wildlands, the western territory had the western desert, and the northern territory had the frozen earth. These were only the most famous places, and there were countless other large and small dangerous areas. However, in terms of danger and mortality, if the Northern Territory's frozen earth was ranked second, then there was no other place that could be ranked first. The frozen earth was publicly recognized as the most dangerous place in the star boundary. Even the great emperors didn't dare to rashly enter a forbidden area. Other places, such as the southern swamp and the wildlands, had many hidden life forces. Although they were extremely dangerous, there were also many hidden opportunities. However, within the frozen earth, there was only death and ice, nothing else. No one knew what the frozen earth was like, because those who entered had all died. Li Jiao was able to escape from the frozen earth by luck. Firstly, his luck was good, and secondly, he didn't go too deep. The place he went back then was only the edge of the frozen earth. That was several hundred years ago. At that time, Li Jiao had just broken through to the third-layer Emperor Realm and was in high spirits. He acted recklessly, thinking that the world was so big that he could go anywhere. On a whim, he went to the frozen earth. That trip was a narrow escape. After that trip, Li Jiao swore that he would never go to the frozen earth again. It was at that time that Li Jiao brought the dragon bloodflower back to the Fire Dragon Palace. He never thought that he would have to go there again after several hundred years. Even though it had been a long time ago, Li Jiao's memory of that experience was still fresh. Along the way, he had revealed a lot of information about the frozen earth to Yang Kai and Zhu Lai. Although it wasn't much, it was still useful. According to Li Jiao, the biggest characteristic of the frozen earth was its cold. That kind of cold wasn't just cold in the ordinary sense, but cold that could extinguish all life. It was a kind of cold that was indescribable and irresistible. That damned place seemed to have a natural restraining effect on all life. Any existence with vitality couldn't survive there for long. This information was quickly verified. The further north the flowing cloud shuttle flew, the colder the environment outside became. Everywhere they looked was a vast expanse of whiteness, making it impossible to distinguish between north, south, east, and west. Snowflakes the size of goose feathers constantly fluttered in the sky, and the entire world seemed to be frozen. Apart from white, no other color could be seen. Even though they were hiding inside the flowing cloud shuttle, the 3 of them could still feel the cold. Although it was weak, it was still extremely rare. Although the flowing cloud shuttle was a flight-type artifact, it was still an emperor artifact. Moreover, it came from Hu Yu and had many defensive functions. Even such an emperor artifact couldn't resist the erosion of the cold, so one could only imagine how harsh the environment outside was. Li Jiao's expression became uglier and uglier. If it weren't for Zhu Lai's deterrence, he would have already retreated. 10 days after setting off from the Fire Dragon Palace, the three of them barely reached the edge of the frozen earth. Li Jiao still remembered the location where he had found the dragon blood flower, so he had been leading the way. 2 days later, Li Jiao suddenly said excitedly, over there, do you see that Three Fingers Mountain? It's right there, that's where I found the dragon blood flower. Yang Kai glanced at Zhu Lai, who frowned slightly and slowly shook his head. He and Zhu Qing were siblings, and they were both red dragons, so they could more or less sense each other. If Zhu Qing was still there, he would definitely be able to detect her. However, at this moment, he couldn't feel any aura belonging to Zhu Qing. Regardless, Yang Kai still controlled the flowing cloud shuttle to fly towards the Three Fingers Mountain. There was a hollow between the mountain peaks, so the flowing cloud shuttle slowly descended and the three of them walked out. As soon as they left the protection of the flowing cloud shuttle, a chill that penetrated deep into their bones and souls rushed towards them from all directions. The three of them couldn't help but shiver and circulate their emperor chi to resist. This was only the edge of the frozen earth, but it was already so cold. An ordinary first-order emperor realm cultivator wouldn't be able to last long here, so it was hard to imagine what the situation inside the frozen earth was like. Zhu Lai's dragon breath seemed to have a restraining effect on this kind of cold. Seeing this, Li Jiao couldn't help but move closer to him, but Zhu Lai just looked at him coldly, so he couldn't help but laugh awkwardly and take 2 steps back. Yang Kai released his divine sense, covering an area of 100 kilometers. After a while, he retracted it and couldn't help but shiver. In that short period of time, he felt that his divine sense was almost frozen. If he hadn't retracted it, he was afraid that it would have been damaged. Are you sure this is the place you pointed out to Zhu Qing that day? Yang Kai turned to look at Li Jiao and asked. Li Jiao hurriedly said, yes, I remember this place. Unless there is another place in the frozen earth that is exactly the same as this place. The Three Fingers Mountain was a very good landmark. Although it had been a few hundred years, Li Jiao's memory wouldn't be wrong. As he spoke, he waved his hand and said, I remember that the dragon blood flower was found in this direction. Yang Kai and Zhu Lai followed him. After a while, Li Jiao stopped at a certain place and looked up at the direction of the Three Fingers Mountain. After silently calculating for a long time, he nodded and said, it's here. It's definitely here. Zhu Lai also said, I can feel a very weak dragon breath. As he spoke, he raised his hand and flames spurted out from his palm, turning into a lifelike fire dragon that crashed into the snow on the ground. The hot flames melted the snow, and soon, a gully more than 100 meters deep appeared on the ground, revealing the soil buried under the snow. The soil was frozen hard, even harder than steel. However, there was a very obvious mark on the soil, which seemed to be a huge claw print. Li Jiao said excitedly, see, I was right. This is the place where the giant dragon fell. The huge claw print was obviously left behind by the giant dragon's claw. Even after several hundred years, it was still well preserved under the cover of the snow. Chapter 2946. The three of them worked together and quickly removed all the snow that covered the area. The huge mark left behind by the giant dragon's fall appeared before their eyes. Just as Li Jiao had said before, there were only marks here and no corpse of the giant dragon. This was because the essence of the giant dragon's flesh and blood had become nutrients, nurturing a dragon blood flower. There was no information left behind by Zhu Qing here, so no one knew if he had come here before. Yang Kai silently sensed for a long time before shaking his head and saying, the source is not here. Although he was not a member of the dragon race, ever since he cultivated the dragon transformation art that Zhu Qing had taught him, the golden divine dragon source had begun to truly fuse with him. His bloodline and body were gradually transforming into the dragon race, so if there was a source of the dragon race here, he would definitely be able to sense it. Zhu Lai glanced at him and said, I want to use the dragon race secret technique, protect me. Yang Kai nodded seriously and walked to the side. Li Jiao's expression changed as he looked at Zhu Lai with curiosity and desire. The Dragon Race secret technique was a very mysterious secret technique that could only be used by those with the bloodline of the Dragon Race. Yang Kai could suppress Zhu Lai and Zhu Qing with the power of his bloodline, but without systematic learning, even he could not use the Dragon Race secret technique because it involved the use of the Dragon Yuan and the incantation of the Dragon language. Li Jiao had a trace of the Dragon Race bloodline, so he was naturally curious and yearning for it. Zhu Lai closed his eyes and calmed his mind. A moment later, he suddenly opened his eyes and slid his other hand like a knife. His sharp nails cut into his palm, and the air was immediately filled with a thick smell of blood. Zhu Lai clenched his wounded hand and raised it high. The Dragon Yuan in his body surged, and a low incantation came from his mouth. The incantation was profound and complicated, and it was very awkward to listen to, as if Zhu Lai's mouth was stuffed with something to speak. Li Jiao, who had pricked up his ears, had a blank expression on his face as he anxiously scratched his head. It wasn't easy for him to encounter a pure dragon race that was displaying the secret techniques of the dragon race in front of him. Naturally, he had the intention of secretly learning from it. Unfortunately, he couldn't even understand what it was saying, so how could he learn it? Yang Kai didn't understand either. However, he felt that when Zhu Lai used the Dragon Clan's secret technique, it was somewhat similar to the witchcraft that the ancient witches used. Both of them required chanting. Under the gazes of the two, drops of blood dripped from Zhu Lai's palm. His dragon blood was different from normal blood. It was like a burning flame, emitting a scorching aura. After landing on the ground, there was a crackling sound as it melted into the ground and disappeared. Zhu Lai's incantation grew louder and louder, gradually becoming similar to a dragon's roar. It also sounded like rolling thunder, causing pain in people's eardrums. His red hair danced in the wind, and his clothes fluttered in the wind. The world seemed to be completely filled with this dragon's roar. Suddenly, Zhu Lai's voice stopped. His aura, which had risen to its peak, was like a deflated balloon. It withered quite a bit in an instant, and even some sweat seeped out of his delicate face. Although he didn't know what kind of dragon race secret technique this was, this move undoubtedly consumed a lot of his energy. Yang Kai and Li Jiao both looked at him anxiously, but Zhu Lai's gaze was lowered as he stared at the ground. The ground was soaked in his blood, and at this moment, it was completely red. The scorching energy collided with the cold air here. Steam was rising from it. At a certain moment, Zhu Lai's eyes lit up. At the same time, Yang Kai and Li Jiao also felt a slight change. The ground, which was soaked in blood, was squirming. It seemed like something was about to break out of the ground. Under the gazes of the three people, a dark red dot bloomed from the ground and quickly rose. Its branches and leaves spread out, and in just a moment, there was an extra foot-tall plant on the ground. The plant was bright red, as if it was soaked in blood. At first glance, this thing looked like a blood coral. Zhu Lai sucked up the foot-tall blood coral and held it in his hand. A dense red light gathered on the crown of the tree and floated in a certain direction as if it had a mind of its own, like a red ribbon hanging on the crown of the tree. Strangely, the direction in which this red ribbon floated was completely different from the direction in which the wind was blowing. Zhu Lai pointed in the direction the red ribbon was pointing and said, "Zhu Qing is over there, still alive." Although he didn't know how he came to this conclusion, there was no doubt that it was related to the dragon race secret technique he had used. Yang Kai didn't say anything else and summoned the flowing cloud shuttle, shouting, "Let's go." Li Jiao stood in place and looked at Yang Kai fawningly. "Palace Master Yang, this Li has already brought you to your destination. The rest of the journey." "Hey, a gentleman uses his mouth and not his fists, this Li is still." Before he could finish speaking, Zhu Lai picked him up and threw him into the flowing cloud shuttle, leaving him with a bitter and resentful expression. He didn't know why this dragon race master was still unwilling to let him go. He had already completed his mission and brought Yang Kai and Zhu Lai to their destination. What happened next should have nothing to do with him. He should be able to leave this damned place and return to the Fire Dragon Palace, but things just didn't go as he wished. As a third-layer Emperor Realm cultivator, he hadn't tasted this kind of powerlessness for many years. He secretly made up his mind that if he could return alive from this trip, he would never have anything to do with the dragon race in the future. This was simply going too far. The flowing cloud shuttle tore through the air, but its speed was getting slower and slower. After using the secret technique, Zhu Lai had become very weak. Yang Kai held the blood coral in his hand and used the red light to guide him in the direction of Zhu Qing. Less than 2,000 miles into the frozen earth, the drift cloud shuttle, which was flying in the air, suddenly shook violently. Then, it plummeted down. Yang Kai was slightly startled, thinking that it had been attacked, but he soon understood what had happened. Kicking Li Jiao away, he woke up Zhu Lai, who was meditating and recovering. Immediately after, he put away the flowing cloud shuttle and stood in the air. A biting cold wind blew, enveloping everyone in it, as if it could freeze one's soul. In such a dangerous environment, even a master who cultivated the ice attribute principle wouldn't be able to stay for long. Li Jiao trembled as he flew over, a gloomy expression on his face as he asked, "What's wrong?" Just now, hiding in the flowing cloud shuttle had provided him with a layer of protection, but now that he was directly in contact with the frozen ground, he could clearly feel his vitality slowly draining away. Although it wouldn't be a big problem for the time being, staying in this place for too long would shorten his lifespan. "It's nothing, we'll probably have to walk the rest of the way on our own." Yang Kai glanced at Zhu Lai as he spoke. A flight-type Emperor artifact like the flowing cloud shuttle was actually frozen to the point of being unable to operate normally in this place. No one would believe such a thing if they hadn't experienced it themselves. Zhu Lai's expression didn't change, but Li Jiao's face paled. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "Gentlemen, this Li has a presumptuous request." Zhu Lai stared at him, his expression even colder than the cold of the frozen ground. Li Jiao's words suddenly changed, "This Li can bring up the rear." "Very well," Yang Kai smiled lightly, holding the dragon blood coral in one hand as he took the lead and flew forward. Zhu Lai stretched out his hand, grabbed Li Jiao, and threw him forward, having him follow closely behind Yang Kai while he walked at the back. Flying in the frozen ground was definitely not a pleasant thing, but Yang Kai soon discovered an interesting phenomenon. The higher he flew, the greater the consumption and the more terrifying the life-extinguishing cold became. After noticing this, he immediately flew down and stayed close to the ground, so the resistance he felt was much less. However, as a result, his speed was much slower, but it was also much safer. After an entire day, the three of them had only traveled a few hundred kilometers. This was simply inconceivable for a group of people from the Emperor realm. After a day, the three of them were shivering all over, their hair and faces covered in ice. No matter how much they circulated their Emperor Qi, they couldn't resist the cold that invaded their bodies. Li Jiao wanted to leave several times, but every time he met Zhu Lai's eyes, the courage he had tried so hard to accumulate suddenly collapsed. He couldn't say a word and could only desperately keep up with Yang Kai's pace. He couldn't understand. Yang Kai was only a first-order Emperor Realm Master, so how could he last so long? Logically speaking, a first-order Emperor Realm Master like him should have frozen to death here long ago, but among the three of them, he seemed to be in the best condition. In this regard, even Zhu Lai, who was a dragon race master, couldn't compare. Another day later, Yang Kai, who was leading the way, suddenly stopped and listened. He vaguely sensed something. Li Jiao, who was following behind him, almost bumped into him. Seeing Yang Kai's dignified look, he couldn't help but ask nervously, "What's wrong, Palace Master Yang?" Yang Kai looked past Li Jiao and said to Zhu Lai, "Something is coming." Zhu Lai nodded slightly. He had also sensed that something was coming. The surrounding air and chill were emitting an abnormal fluctuation. "What is it? What is it?" Li Jiao asked with a pale face. The frozen earth was lifeless, so what could be here? Seeing that Yang Kai and Zhu Lai both seemed to be serious, he couldn't help but feel worried. It should be that thing. Yang Kai looked up into the distance and narrowed his eyes. Li Jiao followed his gaze and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He saw that on the horizon, a black mass had appeared at some unknown time. It was like a giant curtain that covered the entire sky and was quickly moving towards them. Cold wave. Li Jiao seemed to have thought of something and quickly retreated as he cried out in alarm. On the line between life and death, He finally suppressed his fear of Zhu Lai and ran back the way he came without looking back. He only wanted to get as far away from the cold wave as possible. Yang Kai and Zhu Lai chased closely behind him. The fear of death offset all unfavorable factors. This time, Li Jiao took the lead and ran faster than anyone else. "What is a cold wave?" Yang Kai asked as he ran. "Heaven's wrath," Li Jiao replied with a ferocious expression. He hated his parents for not giving birth to him with 2 more legs, running so slowly. The heaven's wrath unique to the frozen earth. Chapter 2947. Li Jiao had escaped from the frozen earth in the past, so he naturally paid more attention to it. However, there was too little information about the frozen earth in this world. Even if he wanted to collect it, he couldn't find much useful information. He knew that there was a kind of heavenly might in the frozen earth called the cold wave, and that no one could survive it. However, he didn't know how the cold wave was formed, how to avoid it, or what it looked like. Now that he saw it with his own eyes, he immediately confirmed that it was the cold wave. The 3 of them weren't fast, so they couldn't escape the cold wave even if they tried their best. Seeing that the distance was getting closer and closer, Yang Kai and Zhu Lai's expressions turned ugly. No one could remain calm in the face of a life and death crisis. Yang Kai tried to use space principles, but found it extremely difficult. The chill in the frozen earth seemed to be able to freeze space, so he had to give up on the idea of teleporting. The cold wave was getting closer and closer to the 3 of them. The bone-chilling cold was like a sledgehammer hitting their backs, making them shiver uncontrollably. Li Jiao's face suddenly turned ferocious. "If this Li is killed by you this time, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost." The grievances and anger he had accumulated over the past few days finally exploded at this moment. He was about to die, so how could he have so many scruples? He opened his mouth and said, "Yang Kai, aren't you very powerful? Even the Monster King's divine spirit is under your control. Think of something now." Seeing that Yang Kai didn't say anything, he said angrily, "You can only rely on the tiger's might. Do you really think this Li is afraid of you? If it weren't for Grandmaster Ji Ying's face, this Li would have already brought people to flatten your High Heaven Palace. I would have wiped out your entire High Heaven Palace. I would have made you wish you were dead. A trivial First-Order Emperor Realm Master dares to be so arrogant in front of this Li. You don't know what you're talking about." He cursed angrily, but it seemed that he still hadn't had enough. He turned to Zhu Lai and said, "Dragon race? So what if the dragon race is so great? Can you look down on me because of the dragon race? This king's bloodline is impure, so what? This king was born from his mother and raised by his father. This king cultivated to the Third-Order Emperor realm with his own efforts. If you don't have the bloodline of the dragon race, I'm afraid you won't even be as good as me." Who knew who he was trying to impress by putting on an arrogant look all day long? If you have the ability, don't use your bloodline to suppress this seat. This Li will definitely let you know this seat's power. Fuck. Why did this Li get involved in this mess with you? You two Jinx, I already knew that coming to the frozen earth with you wouldn't end well. You should have left earlier. It's all your fault. This Li has already brought you to this place. Why are you still holding on to this Li and not letting go? Do you really think I'm a pushover? Just you wait. If I can survive this ordeal, I'll definitely bring my men and kill my way to the High Heaven Palace. Kill my way to Dragon Island and kill all of you." He chattered incessantly, as if he had lost his mind and became a little hysterical. Unfortunately, no matter how he vented his anger, Yang Kai and Zhu Lai did not seem to care about him. The 2 of them exchanged glances. Zhu Lai said, "Hurry up and use whatever trump cards you have. If we delay any longer, I'm afraid it will really be too late." Yang Kai curled his lips. "You have many dragon race secret techniques, yet you're counting on me? I'm only in the First Order, what trump cards could I possibly have?" Zhu Lai took a deep look at him and sighed, "Fine, since you want to hide your strength, I won't force you. Let me do it." Li Jiao's cursing came to an abrupt end, as if his mouth was pinched by an invisible hand. He looked at Yang Kai, then at Zhu Lai. With a smile on his face, he asked cautiously, Master, do you have a way to get out of this crisis? Zhu Lai said coldly, you can try. Li Jiao immediately said, then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and do it. Yang Kai looked at him with a smile as he ran. Li Jiao's snow-white face couldn't help but blush as he said awkwardly, Master, you must take me with you. Just now. I don't know what happened, but I was blinded. That was definitely not my true thoughts. Master, please don't take it to heart. He couldn't wait to slap himself. He spoke too quickly and didn't expect to cause such a big trouble. He didn't know if this dragon race would be willing to take care of him. Fortunately, his worries were superfluous. When a dragon's roar sounded, a giant red dragon figure appeared above Zhu Lai's head. The giant dragon circled and wrapped the three of them in an instant. The biting cold seemed to be isolated, giving people a sense of security for no reason. Zhu Lai let out a low shout, and some signs of dragon transformation appeared on the surface of his body. He then turned around and rushed in the direction of the cold wave. Li Jiao was scared out of his wits. He screamed, but he didn't dare to break away from the protection of the red dragon. He could only watch as he got closer and closer to the cold wave. Yang Kai was also slightly surprised, but he soon understood Zhu Lai's plan. With the current speed of the three of them, it was impossible to escape the cold wave's pursuit. Rather than being caught, it was better to do the opposite. Perhaps they could rely on the three of them to make a breakthrough. This wasn't a good idea, but it was worth a try. Perhaps it could really get them out of this crisis. In the whistling cold wind, the cold wave was getting closer and closer to them. Li Jiao was so shocked that his face was pale. Otherwise, with his powerful mental strength, he would have fainted already. After a dozen breaths, the three of them finally collided with the cold wave and were directly enveloped by the darkness. Zhu Lai's expression changed greatly as he suddenly realized that something was wrong. This cold wave was a little different from what he had expected. It didn't seem to be a natural disaster formed by the gathering of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. This cold wave felt more like an indescribable existence to him. All of his preparations were unable to be used and were directly swallowed up. Yang Kai even cried out involuntarily, the law of space? He never thought that the cold wave that existed in this frozen earth would contain extremely rich power of the law of space. The moment he was enveloped by the cold wave, the surrounding space became chaotic, giving him a feeling of being teleported. Furthermore, this feeling was even more intense than being teleported across territory. It was as if his entire body was being torn apart, turning into countless fine powder that surged into the passage in the void. Almost instinctively, Yang Kai also urged his law of space. The next moment, he felt dizzy and could no longer sense the existence of Zhu Lai and Li Jiao. No one knew where the two of them had gone. Yang Kai only felt as if he was falling and could not see the bottom. The feeling of dizziness became more and more serious, and only when he urged his law of space did he feel better. After an unknown amount of time, the feeling of dizziness suddenly disappeared. He fell heavily on a piece of land, bounced up, and rolled a few times before finally stabilizing. All the bones in his body felt as if they had been shattered. An unprecedented nausea welled up in his heart, causing him to retch a few times. The surroundings were quiet. It was still covered in white snow, but there was no trace of Li Jiao or Zhu Lai. Slowly getting up, Yang Kai's expression gradually became solemn. Although the surrounding scenery didn't seem much different from before, it was no longer as cold as before. He keenly felt that this place was different, as if it was another world, a world that didn't belong to the same plane as the frozen earth. He tried to sense the law of heaven and earth in the surroundings, and a moment later, his guess was confirmed. This was indeed another world. Although the law of heaven and earth here was complete, it seemed to be very chaotic. It was very different from the law of the star boundary. In other words, he was not in the star boundary now. Recalling what he had encountered before, he gradually had a guess, but he was not too sure. The only thing he was certain of was that the reason he had come to this place was greatly related to the cold wave. Perhaps the cold wave was the entrance to this world, and its world-destroying power was just a disguise. Suddenly, a red light appeared in the corner of his eyes. Yang Kai turned his head and saw the dragon blood coral in his hand blossoming with a light 100 times more intense than before. The dense light on the coral crown had condensed into a thick red ribbon at this moment, drifting in a certain direction, guiding Yang Kai. Zhu Qing. Yang Kai raised his brow, immediately understanding why the dragon blood coral had such a change. This was something that Zhu Lai had created using his own dragon blood and the dragon race's secret technique. Its main purpose was to find Zhu Qing's whereabouts. Previously, when he was searching in the frozen earth, it had indeed guided him. However, it was far less fierce and obvious than the guidance this time. Zhu Qing was nearby. She might not be far from him. When the cold wave arrived, it swept across a wide area. He was brought into this world by the cold wave, so if Zhu Qing was also swallowed by the cold wave, she should also appear in this world. That was why the dragon blood coral was acting so strangely. Thinking of this, Yang Kai hurriedly pulled himself together, picked up the dragon blood coral, and dashed in the direction it was guiding him. In the vast snowy mountains, Yang Kai walked alone. An hour later, Yang Kai indeed found a familiar figure less than 300 kilometers away from where he had just appeared. Blood-red hair like fire, a petite body lying on the snowy ground, and it was unknown whether she was dead or alive. Yang Kai hurriedly ran over and helped the figure up, brushing away the hair that brushed against her face. As expected, he saw Zhu Qing's face. He sighed slightly. Although he did not know where he was now, he finally had some good news. He had found Zhu Qing. As for Zhu Lai and Li Jiao, Yang Kai estimated that they should not be in any danger. Although the cold wave looked terrifying, it did not seem to be harmful. The reason he had separated from them was because he had instinctively used his space principles when he was enveloped by the cold wave. Zhu Qing's situation seemed a little strange. She was still a member of the dragon race, and her cultivation was comparable to a third-layer Emperor Realm cultivator. There was no reason for her to faint on the ground for no reason. Perhaps it was related to being swallowed by the cold wave. After all, after being swallowed, even Yang Kai, who was proficient in space principles, felt nauseous for a while. However, this was not the main reason. Yang Kai felt that her body was very cold, like a block of ice. Even her vitality was extremely weak. Chapter 2948. Helping Zhu Qing up and letting her lean on him, Yang Kai stretched out 2 fingers and placed them on her wrist, pouring his emperor qi into her body to investigate her condition. After a while, Yang Kai frowned. The aura in Zhu Qing's body was extremely chaotic. This kind of chaos did not seem to be the result of serious injuries, but more like a misfire that had become the demon race. This puzzled Yang Kai. He did not know what happened to Zhu Qing in the frozen earth that caused her to be in danger of becoming the demon race. After all, she was a member of the dragon race. In addition, Zhu Qing's body was also in an extremely bad condition. She had probably stayed in the frozen earth for too long, so her vitality had been eroded by the cold. Most of her physique had lost its vitality, and if she was not treated soon, her body would likely be destroyed. Yang Kai did not dare to delay. Releasing his divine sense, he quickly found a cave nearby, picked up Zhu Qing, and quickly ran into it. This cave was probably left behind by some kind of wild beast as there was a pungent smell inside, but it had been abandoned for a long time. It seemed that no living creature had entered it for a long time. In order to avoid any unnecessary interference during the treatment process, Yang Kai directly summoned the sealed world bead and brought Zhu Qing into his sealed world bead. In an environment filled with the fragrance of flowers and birds, Yang Kai placed Zhu Qing flat on the ground, took out a large number of pills from his space ring, opened her mouth, and stuffed them in without any explanation. Zhu Qing's current situation was a bit tricky. Affected by the cold of the frozen earth, her body was seriously damaged, and the dragon yuan in her body was in chaos for some reason. So if Yang Kai wanted to save her, he would have to force the cold invading her body from the outside. Only then would she be able to control the dragon yuan in her body. Most of the pills in Yang Kai's hands were high-quality spirit pills, so if he stuffed them into her mouth, at least 1 million source crystals would be gone. However, the effect was also extremely significant. With the help of Yang Kai, The medicinal efficacies of the spirit pills quickly spread through Zhu Qing's limbs and bones, gradually emitting bursts of bone-chilling cold. This cold was similar to the pervasive cold of the frozen earth, overflowing from her body. The surrounding flowers and plants quickly withered. Gradually, a trace of warmth returned to her cold body, and some vitality appeared on her snow-white face. Yang Kai kept calling her name, even breaking into her knowledge sea with his divine sense in an attempt to wake her up. But even so, Zhu Qing did not respond. She seemed to be unable to perceive any information from the outside world, her eyes tightly closed, as if she was already dead. Yang Kai could only continue to urge his Emperor Qi to alleviate her crisis. After an unknown amount of time, the situation did not improve much. After the Emperor pill's medicinal efficacies took effect, the cold in Zhu Qing's body became vigorous again. This cold seemed to have a life of its own, able to divide and multiply in her body, and as long as a trace of it remained, it could rise again. Yang Kai withdrew his hand and sighed, staring at her delicate face. After a long time, he seemed to have made up his mind and reached out his hand. A ball of dark green light suddenly appeared in his palm. Although it was just a ball of light, it contained an unimaginable amount of vitality. The essence of the immortal tree. This time, Yang Kai did not pluck the leaves of the immortal tree because there were not many leaves left. If he plucked any more, the immortal tree would become bare. Extracting the essence of the immortal tree like this would inevitably cause some damage to the immortal tree, but with his life at stake, Yang Kai could not care less. You're on your own now. If this can't save you, then your life has indeed come to an end. Yang Kai muttered to himself, pinching open Zhu Qing's mouth with one hand and stuffing the green light into her mouth with the other. The green light turned into a drop of tree sap and rolled down Zhu Qing's throat into her stomach. A dazzling light burst out and Zhu Qing's body suddenly became green, as if moss had grown all over her body. At the same time, her weak vitality suddenly erupted, like a basin of oil being poured into a raging fire. Kai. Traces of cold leaked out of Zhu Qing's pores like tiny insects, melting with the green light around her body, creating a series of crackling sounds. Yang Kai watched quietly, his divine sense constantly monitoring Zhu Qing's situation. With the passage of time, the cold leaking out of Zhu Qing's body became less and less, and the green light around her body became weaker and weaker, as if the cold and the essence of the immortal tree were about to run out of energy. Zhu Qing's body gradually regained its vitality, and her exposed skin slowly turned dark red. Yang Kai secretly let out a sigh of relief, feeling that his efforts were not in vain. At a certain moment, when the last trace of cold in Zhu Qing's body was expelled, the green light that enveloped her body also slowly disappeared. The essence of the immortal tree was not exhausted, but it would become the capital for Zhu Qing to become stronger in the future, hiding in her flesh. She lay on the ground, as if she could sleep until the end of time. Yang Kai crossed his arms and stood beside her, looking down at her from above. His eyes swept over her from head to toe in an unscrupulous manner, and he could not help but feel a little excited when he held her in his arms. As expected of the dragon race, this chest, this ass, these thighs, tsk. Yang Kai commented, as if he was admiring a work of art. Suddenly, a trace of evil spread in his heart. After suffering such a big loss, shouldn't he collect some interest? In any case, it was not like he had never taken advantage of this girl before. The first time was strange, the second time was familiar, and the third time was a walk in the park. If it were not for her, he would not have taken the risk to come to the frozen earth, and he would not have been inexplicably swallowed by the cold, causing him to not even know where this place was. Perhaps he would not be able to leave this place for the rest of his life. He would have to live here with her and give birth to a bunch of little dragon people. An excited voice in his mind clamored, collect interest, I must collect some interest. As soon as he thought of this, Kai Yang was startled. He knew that it was his suppressed desire causing mischief. He hurriedly tried to suppress the impulse in his heart, but his hand suddenly felt a lingering softness that made him forget to return. Looking over, Yang Kai could not help but be stunned. His two hands had unknowingly covered Zhu Qing's perfectly round chest, and it was the towering fullness that transmitted amazing elasticity that made him involuntarily pinch twice. His breathing became heavy, Yang Kai felt the blood in his body boil, and the clamoring voice in his mind became even louder. His eyes were firmly locked below Zhu Qing's slender white neck, and he swallowed a mouthful of saliva, like a traveler who had been walking in the desert for several months who saw a basin of clear water, and wanted nothing more than to plunge his head into it. The person in front of him suddenly opened her eyes, and stared at Yang Kai with an expressionless face. When their eyes met, Yang Kai felt as if a basin of cold water had been poured over him from head to toe, and his whole body instantly sobered up. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he said with an embarrassed smile, "If I told you, this is a misunderstanding, would you believe me?" Zhu Qing did not respond in the slightest, and those clear eyes were still coldly staring at him. Yang Kai stood up, frowned and pondered for a moment, and then put on a troublemaker's posture. "Well, I did touch, so what? I won't lose a piece of flesh from touching a few times, and speaking of which, I saved your life. If I didn't come to the frozen earth to find you and save you from the fire and water, I'm afraid you would have already died. So just treat what happened just now as a thank you gift from me, and we are even. I think this is very fair, what do you think?" Zhu Qing still did not respond. Yang Kai said with an annoyed face, "Can't you give me some reaction?" As if in response to Yang Kai's endless chatter, Zhu Qing really did give a reaction, but it was a little different from what Yang Kai had expected. She opened her mouth, and a very painful groan came from her throat, as if she was about to die, and then her whole body suddenly curled up, and at the same time, her body was filled with an extremely cold aura. Yang Kai was shocked. It's still not enough. He thought that the essence of the immortal tree had not dispelled the cold that had invaded her body, but he soon realized that something was wrong. This kind of cold was not the cold of the frozen earth. Although it was cold enough, it was somewhat different from the cold of the frozen earth, and they did not come from the same source. Just as Yang Kai was at a loss, a high-pitched dragon's roar sounded, and then a giant dragon phantom rushed out from Zhu Qing's body. "Heh!" Yang Kai looked at the giant dragon phantom in a daze, and wondered if he had seen wrongly. Zhu Qing was the red dragon of the dragon race, so her dragon race origin was the same as Zhu Lai's. If she revealed her true form, it would definitely be a red dragon, but at this moment, what appeared in front of Yang Kai was actually a snow-white crystal dragon phantom. At first glance, the giant dragon looked like a lifelike ice sculpture, and there was not the slightest flaw, but it was completely different from the red dragon. This was an ice dragon, and the cold aura that was emitted from Zhu Qing's body was exactly that of this ice dragon. Yang Kai wondered if he had recognized the wrong person. Did Zhu Qing have a twin sister or something like that? There were many people in the world who looked alike, but as a member of the dragon race, it was impossible to make a mistake. At this moment, another high-pitched dragon's roar sounded. When Yang Kai looked over, he saw a red dragon phantom appear. The second dragon that appeared actually came from Zhu Qing's body. Yang Kai's expression changed as all kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind. He instantly understood a lot of things. Two origins. There were actually two origins in Zhu Qing's body, and the two origins were of opposite attribute. The red dragon that appeared later was clearly Zhu Qing's origin power, and the ice dragon that appeared first was just an invader. The two origins clashed in Zhu Qing's body, causing her dragon Yuan to become chaotic and showing signs of becoming the demon race. Although Yang Kai had checked her situation before, he didn't notice this. It wasn't that he didn't check carefully enough, it was just that Zhu Qing's source was hidden too deep. Coupled with the fact that Zhu Qing's body was seriously injured, he had overlooked it. No wonder Zhu Qing did not wake up even though her body was fine. It turned out that the real problem was not her body, but the conflict between the two origins. Then the question was, where did this ice dragon's origin come from? Chapter 2949. It was impossible for a normal dragon race to have two sources of power, especially two diametrically opposed sources of power. Ice and fire could not coexist at all. If Zhu Qing had two sources of power in her body, she would not have lived to this day. In a flash, a bold guess appeared in Yang Kai's mind. That ice dragon source was most likely the power left behind by the giant dragon that died in the frozen earth. The reason why Zhu Qing came to the frozen earth was not to find the bones of her clansmen, because Li Jiao had said very clearly that the giant dragon's bones had long been reduced to dust, and there was not the slightest bit of it left behind. Zhu Qing insisted on coming here only to bring back the source of power left behind by her clansmen. Now it seemed that she had found it, but was harmed by this ice dragon source. The source of power had no thoughts or reason, it was just a kind of power. The two kinds of power coexisted in Zhu Qing's body, and there was an instinctive rejection and struggle. With Zhu Qing's body as the battlefield, they fought endlessly. Yang Kai could not see this kind of internal struggle, unless these two kinds of power were directly exposed like this. And just as he was shocked, the two giant dragon figures roared in unison, and then plunged into Zhu Qing's body and disappeared. Zhu Qing wailed in pain. At this moment, she was completely unconscious. Opening her eyes just now was not consciously controlled, but an instinctive reaction of her body. A thin layer of ice appeared on the surface of Zhu Qing's body, and traces of coldness overflowed from her flesh, as if to completely freeze her. But very soon, a scorching hot energy spread out, shattering the chill in the air. Zhu Qing felt as if her entire body was on fire. Her skin was red, and her whole body was boiling hot. Even the ground she was lying on was scorched. The two kinds of power appeared alternately in Zhu Qing's body, and it went round and round, as if it would never stop. Zhu Qing's groans became more and more painful. Yang Kai was a little confused, and he did not know what to do. If it was just an injury, no matter how serious her injuries were, he could always think of a way to deal with them. In fact, Zhu Qing had been healed by the essence of the immortal tree, so her injuries weren't too serious. It was just that the two essences were fighting uncontrollably. As the battlefield's physical body, it was bound to be severely damaged. Source essence. Source essence. Yang Kai's eyes lit up as he rushed forward and pulled Zhu Qing into his arms again, letting her lean against him. Then, he silently activated his own golden holy dragon origin power. A dazzling golden dragon shadow appeared behind him and disappeared into his body in a flash. The temperature of Zhu Qing's body changed very quickly. A moment ago, it was as hot as fire, but the next moment, it was as if she had just been picked up from a world of ice and snow. It was bone-chilling cold. When the aura of the golden holy dragon's origin was revealed, the speed at which the hot and cold alternated suddenly slowed down. There's hope. Yang Kai was overjoyed. He was just trying to see if his golden holy dragon's origin could have some suppressive effect. Now it seemed that it was indeed effective. The most important thing now was to wake up Zhu Qing. Only when she was awake could she fully activate her own origin power and suppress the ice dragon's origin and expel or kill it. So, Yang Kai pressed the tip of his tongue and activated his divine sense. Just as he was about to cast a spell, Zhu Qing suddenly hugged him tightly. As if she had tasted something sweet, the aura on Yang Kai's body made Zhu Qing subconsciously react correctly. Although Zhu Qing's figure was petite and exquisite, she was still a member of the dragon race. Her strength was not inferior to Yang Kai's. When they first met, Yang Kai had experienced her violent strength. With this tightening, Yang Kai only felt that his body was about to be broken. He couldn't help but turn a little pale. However, the soft sensation that came from his chest made his mind ripple. This was not the end. Zhu Qing was like a puppy, snuggling in his arms and sniffing, making strange sounds in her throat, as if she had found some delicious food and wanted to eat it. Yang Kai felt as if he had been struck by lightning and suddenly became extremely stiff. It was not until a burst of pain came from his chest that he suddenly woke up as if from a dream. He angrily pushed away Zhu Qing's head and pressed his palm against her face, hissing, "Are you a dog? Why are you biting people?" Zhu Qing's eyes were blurred and filled with a strange light. Her breathing inexplicably became rapid. Yang Kai could clearly feel the hot breath from her nostrils burning his hand. Her delicate face was tender and beautiful, exuding a kind of charm that made people want to fly into a flame. Yang Kai felt as if tens of thousands of ants were crawling in his heart. It was difficult to suppress the itch. Zhu Qing opened her mouth again and bit Yang Kai's hand with her white teeth. This bite was so heavy that it really left a mark and golden blood came out from the wound. The blood was like the most delicious food. Zhu Qing swallowed it in big mouthfuls. Her small and warm tongue kept licking Yang Kai's palm, giving him a tingling feeling. Yang Kai wanted to withdraw his hand, but after being licked by her, he was a little reluctant to do so. But soon Yang Kai discovered a strange phenomenon. After swallowing his blood, Zhu Qing's condition seemed to have improved a lot. The frequency of the alternating cold and heat became slower and slower, and the duration of the cold breath became faster. It was only a flash in the pan before it was suppressed by the heat. His blood seemed to be of great help to her current state. After pondering for a while, Yang Kai vaguely understood. Although he was born a human, after cultivating the dragon transformation skill, he began to truly integrate with the golden divine dragon source. In other words, the blood in his body was no longer pure human blood. There was also some blood of the dragon race, and it was an extremely high-level dragon race bloodline. In the dragon race bloodline, the strong had a strong suppressive power over the weak. The golden divine dragon source could help Zhu Qing alleviate the crisis, so his own half-dragon blood would naturally be even more effective. No wonder Zhu Qing bit him. She must have noticed it herself, so she did this. Yang Kai could of course get rid of her, but he just stood there and let Zhu Qing drink his blood. Zhu Qing was still in a daze and had not regained her consciousness. Her hazy eyes were full of charm. She swallowed Yang Kai's blood in big mouthfuls, and her nimble tongue kept circling Yang Kai's palm. The evil thoughts in Yang Kai's body were about to explode, and he needed to desperately suppress them to stabilize his mind. He turned his eyes away, not looking at Zhu Qing's eyes, and not feeling the numbness in his palm, for fear of another accident. After an unknown amount of time, he suddenly felt Zhu Qing let go of his hand. He opened his eyes and immediately saw Zhu Qing looking at him with a red face. She said in surprise, "You're okay?" He could see that Zhu Qing should be awake and should have regained her consciousness, because the information revealed in her eyes was a little different from before. The answer to his question was a dragon race secret technique. Zhu Qing opened her mouth and spat out an arrow of blood. This blood was Zhu Qing's own blood. It was dark red, like a burning flame. The dragon blood dissolved in mid-air, turning into a strangely shaped seal, and suddenly hit Yang Kai's forehead. Yang Kai's face was blank, and he fell straight to the ground. This dragon race secret technique seemed to have a very strong binding power, making Yang Kai unable to even move his fingers. He was shocked and instinctively wanted to urge the power of the golden divine dragon source. Although the dragon race secret technique Zhu Qing used was powerful, Yang Kai felt that he should be able to break it by relying on the suppression of the golden divine dragon source. Just now, Yang Kai was caught off guard. He did not expect that she would attack him, so he fell for it. However, he did not act immediately because a delicate fragrance suddenly hit him in the face. Zhu Qing was kneeling between his legs, her hands on his chest, looking down at him condescendingly. Her fiery red hair spread like the most exquisite silk on her smooth back, covering her slender buttocks, but it also added to her seductive charm. Her breathing was extremely rapid, as if she was about to die, unable to breathe, and her towering and plump chest was constantly rising and falling, creating a breathtaking arc. The delicate fragrance that made one's heart flutter became stronger and stronger, as if every pore on her body was emitting this fragrance, filling the entire world. Her long eyelashes were trembling, and she was obviously very nervous, but her eyes were like a stirred pool of water, showing her extreme restlessness and struggle. "You! What are you doing?" As soon as Yang Kai spoke, he felt that he had asked a stupid question. He recognized this look. It was a look of extreme hunger. In the past, Shan Qing Luo would often reveal such a look. His blood seemed to have been ignited, beginning to boil in his meridians, flesh, and blood, making him feel as if his body was on fire. The evil thoughts that had been suppressed for a long time suddenly found an outlet, drowning his reason. The two small hands on his chest suddenly exerted force, directly tearing his clothes apart. Yang Kai took a deep breath and opened his mouth, but no words came out. His clothes quickly became messy, and the clothes wrapped around the two of them quickly turned into pieces, fluttering in the air. Zhu Qing's throat constantly made strange sounds, and her hot and tender body rode on Yang Kai's body, twisting restlessly. She knew what she wanted, but she had never had such an experience, so it took her a long time to gradually master the method. Her white body sank slightly, her teeth biting her red lips as her brow furrowed. Yang Kai closed his eyes, spread his hands, and grasped the grass around him, whispering, "It's my first time, be gentle." Zhu Qing's body suddenly sank, and an abnormal blush appeared on her snow-white skin. She raised her head as if she was suffocating, her beautiful hair falling like a waterfall. She did not respond for a long time, and only after a long time did she let out a heart-wrenching scream. Yang Kai also roared, feeling as if he had fallen into magma, an unimaginable heat enveloping him from all directions, as if it was trying to melt him. He had never experienced such a feeling before, giving him an indescribable sense of excitement. In the mysterious small world, the sky was the quilt, the earth was the bed, the hair was disheveled, and their 10 fingers were intertwined. They were not allowed to live a life of luxury, nor were they allowed to accompany each other in the afterlife. Chapter 2950. The wind and rain lingered in the air, charming and alluring. Everything that happened yesterday seemed like a dream. Her long eyelashes fluttered a few times before Zhu Qing slowly opened her eyes, just in time to see a pair of smiling eyes. The man in her dream was lying on the grass, his head resting on his arms, looking at her with a smile. His eyes were overflowing with an indescribable feeling. And she was actually lying on top of him. She didn't know how long she had slept. She was completely naked. Feeling the warmth of the other person's skin, Zhu Qing couldn't help but scream and try to get up. But just as her body moved, she fell back down. She couldn't help but cover her lower abdomen, her forehead sweating from the pain. "Don't move." Kai Yang reached out and grabbed her waist, his big hands unscrupulously moving up and down her smooth back and waist. Zhu Qing let out a muffled groan. The fiery red color climbed up her cheeks like 2 clouds. The intimate touch and caress of the opposite sex made her lose her balance. She only felt that her whole body was soft and she couldn't exert any strength. "What did you do to me?" She gritted her teeth and asked, tears welling up in her eyes. "Hey!" Yang Kai's hand stopped. She didn't know if it was intentional or not, but it just so happened to be placed on her delicate round buttocks. With an unhappy expression, he said, "You're asking the wrong question. Don't you remember what you did?" "I." Zhu Qing opened her mouth, her expression changing. The scene in her dream gradually became clear. The blood slowly faded from her face and her delicate body couldn't help but tremble. He remembered. Slowly, he remembered everything. She came to the frozen earth and found the lost giant dragon origin. But when she was trying to collect it, there was an accident. She didn't know why the ice dragon origin didn't cooperate, but instead escaped into the depths of the frozen earth. She chased it all the way, going through many hardships, and finally caught up. Just as she was about to subdue it, the ice dragon origin rushed into her body and clashed with her own origin. She had no choice but to find a quiet place to resolve the crisis. If there was no interference, she should be fine. However, a sudden disaster disrupted her plans. She felt a force approaching her, and before she could escape, she fell into darkness. After that, it was what happened in the dream. "It's your blood." Zhu Qing understood everything. "What?" Yang Kai asked. Zhu Qing grits her teeth, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Why are there so many evil thoughts in your blood? What do you think about every day?" If she hadn't drunk his blood and been influenced by his evil thoughts, how could she have done such a shameless thing in her dream? "So it's my fault." Yang Kai was speechless. "I didn't ask you to drink it. You were the one who refused to let go. At that time, I'll kill you." As Zhu Qing spoke, she was about to make a move. However, when she moved slightly, she felt a pain coming from her lower abdomen. She couldn't mobilize any strength at all. Yesterday seemed to be a little too crazy. Yang Kai sneered, "You want to go back on your word after eating? And you want to kill me? This is the first time I've seen a woman like you." As he spoke, he used a little force and flipped Zhu Qing over. Then, he supported himself with his arms and leaned against her. Zhu Qing looked at him nervously and said in a trembling voice, What are you doing?" This aggressive posture made her uncomfortable. She couldn't show the pride of the dragon race. Yang Kai put his hand on her lower abdomen and gently rubbed it. He poured his emperor's qi into her body through his palm to relieve her discomfort. It's everyone's first time, so it's inevitable that we don't know how to control ourselves. We'll get used to it slowly in the future. Ian, I don't know what you're thinking, but I feel that since things have already come to this, there's no point in blaming others. Look at me. Although I'm a human, I'm not bad, right? I've been looking at myself for decades, and the more I look, the more handsome I become. As for you, although your temper isn't very good, it's not bad. Can we make do with each other? Everything has a beginning and an end. His serious expression made Zhu Qing a little absent-minded. Ever since she met Yang Kai, this was the first time Zhu Qing had seen such an expression on his face. The big hand rubbing her lower abdomen seemed to have some kind of magical power that could destroy all solid defenses. Endless ripples appeared in her heart, making it impossible for her to calm down and think. You want to take responsibility? Zhu Qing didn't know why she couldn't get angry anymore. She asked softly. No, you have to take responsibility for me, Yang Kai said seriously. Zhu Qing felt that this was both annoying and funny. She pretended to be cold and said, "Why should I take responsibility for you? Who do you think you are?" Yang Kai didn't answer her question. Instead, he asked, "Do you feel better?" "Much better." Zhu Qing nodded. Suddenly, she realized that the topic had been changed. She couldn't help but glare at him. Yang Kai said again, "Do you want to do it again?" The topic changed a little too quickly. Zhu Qing's momentum that she had just gathered suddenly dissipated. The warmth in her lower abdomen was like a prairie fire that quickly spread, making her whole body hot. Zhu Qing's long eyelashes trembled, but before she could say anything, Yang Kai had already let out a low roar, mounted his horse, and charged into battle with his spear. Along the way, he slaughtered his enemies, causing them to throw away their armor and beg for mercy. Half a day later, Zhu Qing looked like she had lost her soul. She lay on the ground like a walking corpse. Her hair was messy and she said weakly, "Please, let me put on my clothes." "I'll help you." Yang Kai grinned like a ladle. "No, you said so just now. I won't believe you anymore. I promise it's true this time. Don't lie to me again." "I won't lie to you." One day later, Zhu Qing curled up in Yang Kai's arms. She was quiet like a sleeping cat. Her breathing was light and slow. She suddenly opened her mouth and said, "There's still a long way to go. Let's stop here this time." "Okay." Yang Kai replied. "Let go of me. I want to put on my clothes." "Okay. What do you want to let me go?" "One more time. One last time. One last time." One day later, they didn't know how many one last times. Finally, the two of them were clean and dressed neatly. Zhu Qing was a little uncomfortable. She sat on the ground quietly. Facing the clear pool in front of her, she combed her long hair. Facing the shadow in the pool, the shadow seemed a little melancholy, but the corners of her eyes couldn't help but slightly raise. Stretching his body, Kai Yang's bones emitted a series of crackling sounds. He felt an indescribable comfort flowing through his body. Lowering his head to look at the person in front of him, he then reached out and gently embraced her from behind. Zhu Qing's body trembled slightly. When she realized that Yang Kai didn't have any intention of touching her and only buried his head in her hair and took deep breaths, she relaxed. "How many?" Zhu Qing suddenly asked. Yang Kai raised his head and rested his chin on her shoulder. He stared at the shadow in the pool and said blankly, "How many?" Zhu Qing sighed and said, "What number am I?" "The first one. Didn't I tell you before?" Yang Kai replied seriously. Zhu Qing snorted and said, "So many tricks. Did you play with yourself before? And, after these few days, do you think I will trust you so easily?" Yang Kai looked worried. "We're already like this. Why don't you trust me? I'm very hurt." Zhu Qing grabbed his hand that was slowly moving towards her chest. She turned her head and sneered. "This is your only chance to be honest. Think carefully before you answer." Yang Kai blinked and looked at the charming face that was so close to him. Then, he kissed her. "Oh, you bastard." Zhu Qing struggled with all her might, but the strength in her hand was getting weaker and weaker. The clothes that she had just put on were messy again. "I've had enough of you," Zhu Qing, who had put on her clothes again, said angrily. When she saw that Yang Kai still had the intention to come over, she quickly pointed at him and said, "Don't come near me for 10 days. Otherwise, I'll cut all ties with you and never talk to you again." Okay. Yang Kai raised his hands in surrender. "Don't be nervous. I won't come near you." Zhu Qing's eyebrows furrowed. She was secretly sulking for a while. Only then did her expression soften. In fact, she was even more angry at herself. Facing this man who had touched her skin for the first time, she didn't have any thoughts of resistance. Taking what he wanted was not something a dragon race person should do. "I won't ask about the past. As for the future, no one can say for sure. You can do whatever you want. I only have one request. If I don't agree, don't force me." Zhu Qing looked at Yang Kai with a serious face. Yang Kai nodded and said, Okay. I'll do as you say." The last bit of complaint in Zhu Qing's heart disappeared instantly. "How are you now? The ice dragon's origin won't be harmful anymore, right?" Yang Kai asked with concern. Although Zhu Qing's condition was very stable these past few days, the ice dragon's origin was still in her body. She had to be careful. "I'm fine now. The ice dragon's origin has been suppressed by me. I'll put it in the dragon tomb when I return to the Dragon Island." Zhu Qing's face suddenly blushed. Yang Kai was baffled by her reaction. After pausing for a moment, she asked, "Did you come here specifically to find me?" Yang Kai said, "Why would I come to the frozen earth if I didn't come to find you? This damned place really is a forbidden area. If it weren't for my good luck, I don't know when I would have found you." He said it casually, but Zhu Qing suddenly felt a sweet feeling. Her chest was full of warmth. "Oh right, your little brother is also here." Zhu Qing frowned and said, "My little brother? Zhu Lai? Yes, that's the guy. If it wasn't for him using the dragon race secret technique, I wouldn't have been able to find you. He actually didn't want you to go back to the Dragon Island with him?" Yang Kai sneered and said, "He wanted to, but after I taught him a lesson, he became a lot more obedient. Although that guy is crazy, he doesn't have much ability. Your husband, I beat him up 2 to 3 times." What husband?" Zhu Qing's face was a little red. She couldn't help but glare at him flirtatiously. Yang Kai's eyes widened again. Chapter 2951. Zhu Qing sensed that something was wrong and quickly changed the topic. "Where is he?" Yang Kai shook his head and said, "I don't know where he went. When the cold wave hit, we were all caught up in it and brought into a small world. He and I were separated. But he shouldn't be in any danger, so you don't have to worry." A small world. Zhu Qing was shocked. Recalling the hazy feeling she had before, she suddenly realized that the irresistible crisis had actually been brought into this small world. She turned her head and looked around, asking, "Is this that small world? It looks pretty good." Inside the sealed world bead, there was an abundant world energy aura, and the environment was quite good. Especially after the 5-colored treasure pagoda appeared, the sealed world bead had undergone a fundamental change. It was now a self-contained world with complete world principles, a true paradise. "Ha." Yang Kai smiled and shook his head. "This is not that small world, this is another one that belongs to me. Chem." Halfway through his words, Yang Kai suddenly turned his head and looked in a certain direction, as if he had discovered something unusual. Zhu Qing asked, "What's wrong?" Yang Kai pondered for a moment and said, "Let me show you something interesting." While speaking, he suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed in a certain direction. Zhu Qing stared curiously, then saw a black, puppy-like thing appear out of thin air in front of her. As soon as the black puppy appeared, it barked a few times, as if it had been greatly frightened, but looking at it shaking its head and wagging its tail, its previous weakness had disappeared. Where did this little monster come from? It's so ugly. Zhu Qing stared at the black puppy and glanced at Yang Kai. She teased, "It looks like you." Yang Kai slowly shook his head. "It's not an ordinary little monster. What's so special about it?" Zhu Qing frowned. "You're from the dragon race. Observe carefully, Yang Kai said as he brought the black puppy in front of him. After hearing Yang Kai's voice, the black puppy seemed to have calmed down. It stared at him with a pair of black eyes, panting and showing a fawning expression. Saliva flowed down its big tongue, looking extremely disgusting. Zhu Qing finally noticed something unusual. She hesitated and said, "It seems to have a very powerful bloodline. It's just not very pure." The dragon race was bound by bloodlines, so they were very knowledgeable about bloodlines. After Gong Yu activated the Return to Ruins bloodline, there were traces left behind. Zhu Qing saw through this. Magical beasts return to ruins. Have you heard of it? Yang Kai asked. Zhu Qing shook her head blankly. Yang Kai said, "This is the first time I've heard of it, but I've seen how powerful it is." As he spoke, he shook the black puppy and said, "Boy, show me what you've got." Woof woof. Don't play dumb. It's the move you used before. If you dare to refuse, I'll stew you and eat you. Woof woof. Zhu Qing put her hand on her forehead and said, "It's not sentient. It only has some human nature. It won't understand what you're saying." Yang Kai sneered, "It knows whether it understands or not. But, forget it. If you say it doesn't understand, then so be it. You're lucky. You actually came back to life." As he spoke, he let go of his hand. The black puppy fell to the ground. It turned its head to look at Yang Kai, then at Zhu Qing. It slowly walked to Yang Kai and climbed down. Zhu Qing covered her mouth and laughed, "It seems to like you a lot. Stop pretending to be cute." Yang Kai stretched out his foot and kicked the black puppy, but it still looked indifferent. Yang Kai ignored it and looked up at Zhu Qing. "Let's go out first. We have to figure out where we are first. I don't know if we can return to the star boundary. It's not that serious." Aren't you proficient in space principles? Zhu Qing felt that Yang Kai was being a bit alarmist, but she didn't feel any sense of crisis at all. She felt that no matter where she was, as long as she could be with this man, it would be fine. Yang Kai smiled, and with a thought, he left the small sealed world with Zhu Qing. Back in the cave, Yang Kai looked at Zhu Qing with a smile and said, "Do you want me to carry you? We don't know where we are, so we have to see if anyone is here first and ask for some information." Zhu Qing blushed and said, "I'm not that weak yet." Saying so, she took the lead and walked out of the cave. Although her steps were light, she seemed to frown with every step. Yang Kai snickered, but suddenly his face sank and he said, "You're so annoying." Zhu Qing's tender body trembled, and her beautiful face turned pale in an instant. She said in a trembling voice, "You think I'm annoying already?" Yang Kai hurriedly said, "I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about this guy." As soon as he said so, a dog barked and the black puppy was thrown out of the small sealed world. After landing on the ground, it angrily barked at Yang Kai, as if saying, "Why didn't you take me with you?" Okay, stop barking. If you bark again, I'll throw you back," Yang Kai said impatiently. The black puppy's barking stopped abruptly, and it quickly ran out of the cave, passing by Zhu Qing. From now on, the sky was high and the sea was wide, and it was free to run as it pleased. Zhu Qing couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Yang Kai came forward and hugged her. She struggled a little, but she didn't insist. After leaving the cave, a white world appeared in front of them. At first glance, this place didn't look much different from the frozen earth, but both Yang Kai and Zhu Qing knew that this wasn't the frozen earth. Because this place didn't have the kind of cold that even they couldn't resist. Woof woof. The black puppy's barking came from afar, and it seemed to be very panicked, as if it had encountered something terrible. Yang Kai swept out with his divine sense, and soon his face showed joy. Zhu Qing also noticed this, and she wasn't used to being so intimate with Yang Kai in front of others, so she subtly distanced herself. A black shadow flashed, and the black puppy returned. Following closely behind it were two vigorous figures, a man and a woman, both of them exuding strong energy fluctuations. When they met Yang Kai and Zhu Qing, the man and woman were obviously taken aback, because they had carefully investigated this area before and hadn't noticed the aura of any living people. They hadn't expected that there would be two more people here. If they were enemies, the two secretly broke out in a cold sweat. The little black dog quickly circled behind Kai Yang and hid behind him, hiding very well. Yang Kai stepped forward and cupped his fists. Greetings, two friends. Although the cultivation of this man and woman wasn't bad, they were only around the Dao Source realm, so Yang Kai didn't care too much about them. It was just that it was rare to meet living people here, so naturally, he wanted to quickly inquire about them. The man and woman looked at each other, and the man cupped his fists in return, frowning as he asked, "Does that little beast belong to you too?" He was a Dao Source realm cultivator, but facing Yang Kai, the Emperor realm, his expression didn't change at all. Instead, he even questioned him, which made Yang Kai a little surprised. This kind of thing was rare in the star boundary, unless the other party's identity had a great origin. It could be seen that this man and woman didn't seem to have a great origin, just an ordinary cultivator. As a newcomer, Yang Kai could only do as the Romans do, so he smiled and nodded. Yes, our Wang's intelligence hasn't been fully developed yet, so he is naughty and mischievous by nature. If he has offended you, please forgive him. The man shook his head, and his divine sense went past Yang Kai to carefully examine the black puppy. After a while, he said, "Maybe I was wrong, he didn't offend us, just a misunderstanding." "What's your name?" "Yang Kai." In this foreign land, there was no need to hide his name. At this moment, the woman who had been standing beside the man suddenly whispered a few words to her husband. The man was stunned for a moment, then looked at Yang Kai in surprise. "You two came from the outside." If it weren't for his wife's reminder, he might not have noticed it, because the two in front of him were dressed slightly differently from him. Yang Kai smiled bitterly. "We did come from the outside." The man nodded. "We haven't had an outsider come to our place for a long time. It seems that your luck isn't very good. I was just about to ask, what is this place?" Yang Kai asked solemnly. The man said, "This place is called the Reincarnation World." "The Reincarnation World?" Yang Kai frowned, and when he was about to ask more, the man said, "If you want to live, come with me quickly, we don't have enough time." "What time?" Yang Kai was stunned. The man didn't intend to answer him. After saying that, he turned around and flew in a certain direction. It seemed that he was really in a hurry. It was the first time Yang Kai had met a Dao Source realm cultivator with such a temper. Not only did he speak with such assurance in front of the Emperor realm, but he also acted like he was superior. However, this was still a clue, so he couldn't just give it up like this. After exchanging a glance with Zhu Qing, he immediately followed. The two of them were strong, so they naturally weren't afraid of a little Dao Source realm cultivator. His figure flickered as he chased after Kai Yang. The little black dog nimbly bit onto Kai Yang's clothes and stubbornly stuck to him, not wanting to be shaken off. Even when the wind blew into its mouth, it still refused to let go. In the end, Zhu Qing pitied it and reached out to scoop it up. The group of four quickly arrived in front of a mountain wall. At first glance, this mountain wall looked inconspicuous, but if one looked carefully, they would see traces left behind by a secret technique. The leader of the group took out a mirror and projected a beam of mystic light onto the mountain wall. Immediately, a cave large enough for two people to pass through appeared. The four of them entered one by one and entered a dry passage. Only then did the man and woman let out a sigh of relief, as if relieved of a heavy burden. Yang Kai asked curiously, "Why are we in such a hurry?" The man led the way in front and explained, "Because in a while, the world principles will change. At that time, all the demons will come out, and the outside will become very dangerous. No one will be able to survive in such an environment. The world principles will change." Yang Kai was shocked, wondering if he had heard wrong. Chapter 2952. The laws of heaven and earth were the supreme power, the foundation that maintained everything in the world. It was impossible for this kind of fundamental law to change in a short period of time, unless doomsday arrived. However, the other party seemed to be speaking with certainty, and he didn't look like he was lying, so he simply couldn't accept it. "Hurry up, what are you still dawdling over there for?" A low shout suddenly came from inside the cave. Yang Kai raised his eyebrows. There was actually someone else in this cave. After hearing this person's urging, the man and woman hurriedly walked into the depths of the cave. Yang Kai signaled Zhu Qing with his eyes and hurriedly followed. A dim light bloomed, and in a stone room that wasn't very spacious, a middle-aged man stood there with a gloomy expression, as if he was waiting for something. Steward Liao, the man who led Yang Kai here, stepped forward and saluted the man with a respectful attitude. However, Steward Liao didn't even look at him, he just curiously stared at Yang Kai and Zhu Qing, who followed over, and said in surprise, "Why are there two more people? Where did they come from? They look a little unfamiliar." The man replied, "They seem to have wandered in from the outside and just happened to meet us, so we brought them along." From the outside? Steward Liao clicked his tongue in wonder, he couldn't help but look at the two unfamiliar faces. When he saw Yang Kai, he didn't have any special reaction, but when he saw Zhu Qing, his eyes couldn't help but light up, revealing an interested expression. Zhu Qing was originally a heavenly beauty, and after being nourished by the rain for a few days, she was at her most tender and beautiful at this moment, so she naturally looked particularly attractive. Zhu Qing's expression was cold. Although she didn't like being stared at like this, she didn't get angry. Yang Kai's figure flashed and stood in front of her, blocking the man's gaze. Steward Liao coldly snorted, his expression was somewhat unhappy. Outsiders really don't know the rules. He looked up at the man and said, "Don't tell me you also don't know the rules." The man hurriedly said, "Thank you, Steward Liao." Steward Liao's expression became slightly better, and he beckoned to the couple. The two of them immediately took a step forward. All of a sudden, Steward Liao muttered something under his breath and activated his own strength. Using his fingers as a sword, he pointed here and there in the air in front of the man. Yang Kai was stunned because he could see some traces of wizard magic in it. This made him a little curious, and he paid more attention to it. Not long after, a complicated mark suddenly appeared in the void. Steward Liao reached out and patted it, and the mark directly entered the man's body. The mark seemed to have other uses, and it did not attack. The man's body only shook slightly, and he was fine. When it was the woman's turn, a rare smile appeared on Manager Liao's cold face. On the contrary, the woman had a nervous expression and looked at her husband for help. The man slowly shook his head and lowered his gaze. Manager Liao followed the same pattern, but this time, his hands and feet weren't very obedient. As his fingers and swords poked here and there, they actually touched the woman's body from time to time. Occasionally, they would sweep past her full breasts, causing the woman's delicate body to tremble slightly. The man turned a deaf ear to it and stood at the side with his head lowered. On the other hand, Manager Liao was in a good mood, and his actions became more and more unbridled. This caused the woman's expression to become more and more unsightly, but she could only force herself to endure it. Not long after, the mark was formed again. Steward Liao patted the mark into the woman's body reluctantly and leisurely stopped. Only then did the woman's stiff body relax, and she looked at her husband with grievance. Turning his head, Steward Liao's face immediately turned cold. He looked at Yang Kai and said, "Since you're from the outside, I'll explain the rules here to you." Yang Kai looked at him with a smile and said, "Please enlighten me." Steward Liao said, "After a while, the laws of heaven and earth will change. In the entire reincarnation world, there's no safe place other than the human sovereign city. Therefore, if you want to live, you must go to the human sovereign city. Do you understand?" "Understood, let's go to the human sovereign city." Yang Kai looked as if he had learned a lesson. Steward Liao continued, "And if you want to go to the human sovereign city, you must use the seal of human sovereign on you. Only those who have the seal of human sovereign can teleport to the human sovereign city through the array. Therefore, there's only one rule here. In this vast world, I'm the most powerful." Yang Kai replied with an "oh" and cupped his fists. "I've learned a lot." Steward Liao waved his sleeves and said in a low voice with his hands behind his back, "Let me ask you, do you want to live or die?" Yang Kai smiled and said, "If we can live, of course we want to live." Steward Liao nodded and said, "You're promising. Come over, let me cast the seal of human sovereign on you." Yang Kai stepped forward, but Steward Liao waved his hand with a look of disdain and said, "The woman will go first, stand aside." Yang Kai frowned and didn't insist. He stepped aside and said, "Steward Liao, please be careful. My wife has a bad temper. Steward Liao snorted coldly and said, if you want to live, then be sensible. As he spoke, he started chanting again. His fingers were like swords, pointing in the air in front of Zhu Qing. It looked like he was drawing something in the air. At the beginning, he was quite obedient, but after a while, the range of his hand movements increased. When his fingers swept across, they directly swept toward Zhu Qing's chest. At this moment, his expression became extremely excited, obviously anticipating something. Zhu Qing suddenly looked up and stared at him coldly. Steward Liao was shocked, but his hand movements didn't stop at all. He looked like he wanted to take advantage of her. Woof. Ah. A dog's bark and a scream sounded almost at the same time. The little black dog in Zhu Qing's arms suddenly opened its mouth and bit Steward Liao's big hand. Its mouth wasn't very big, but it swallowed Steward Liao's entire hand. Its sharp teeth were firmly stuck on his wrist, and blood instantly flowed out. Steward Liao was in pain and couldn't stop howling. However, the little black dog refused to let go and looked like it was going to bite his hand off. Its head kept shaking and it even let out a low growl as if it was trying to show off its power. Let go of me. Little bastard, you're courting death. Steward Liao cursed angrily. Since he couldn't break free, he fiercely slapped the little black dog with his palm. When the energy surged, thunder and lightning flashed in the cave. Yang Kai flicked his finger, and a blast of energy pierced through the air and attacked. Steward Liao howled in pain again, and the arm that he swung out drooped down weakly. Steward Liao turned his head and looked at Yang Kai with resentment and hatred. He gritted his teeth and roared, You actually dare to attack me. It had been a long time since he encountered something like this. He had always been the one bossing people around and taking whatever he wanted. He didn't expect that he would kick an iron plate this time. This unforeseen event happened in the blink of an eye. The pair of men who led Yang Kai and Zhu Qing here were also shocked. Seeing that Steward Liao was at a disadvantage, the man hurriedly said, Stop. Don't hurt him. The woman also finally spoke, Don't hit him. You will regret it. This was the first time she spoke, and her voice was filled with indescribable anxiety. Steward Liao also hurriedly said to them, Quick. Kill these two people for me. Otherwise, I will punish both of you. The man and woman were stunned when they heard this, and their faces turned pale for a moment. It was as if they had committed a terrible crime, and they were at a loss for what to do. Why are you so arrogant? Yang Kai walked in front of Steward Liao, stared at him curiously, and said, Tell me, why are you so arrogant? A mere first-order Dao Source realm dares to be impudent in front of this young master. Steward Liao's forehead was full of cold sweat. He struggled a few times but couldn't break free from the little black dog's grasp. He sneered, Why? Because I am a steward, because I control the seal of human sovereignty. Yang Kai turned his head to look at the man and woman, and said, Just because of this seal of human sovereignty. So you have to swallow your anger even if you are bullied. This guy's strength isn't as high as yours, right? The man lowered his head and said, Without the seal of human sovereignty, you can't enter the human sovereign city. If you can't enter the human sovereign city, you will die. Yang Kai sneered, What joy is there in life? What fear is there in death? You are a man, after all. If you don't dare to retaliate when your wife is being bullied in front of you, you might as well die. He turned his head and winked at Zhu Qing, saying, Qing, don't worry. Your husband won't let you lose a single hair even if I die. Zhu Qing curled her lips and said, Don't be so glib. I didn't see you do anything just now. Yang Kai smiled and said, He's just a piece of trash. You can kill him in one breath. Why would you need me to do anything? Zhu Qing snorted and didn't say anything else. The man was humiliated by Yang Kai's words. The woman walked forward and grabbed his hand. She looked at Yang Kai and said, You are new here, so don't speak carelessly if you don't know the rules here. Hurry up and let go of Steward Liao. Otherwise, you won't be able to establish yourself in the human sovereign city. Steward Liao was also energized, and he shouted, Newcomers always have to suffer a little before they learn the rules. Hurry up and let go, or I will make you die a horrible death. Yang Kai smiled and asked, Will I be able to settle this peacefully if I let you go? Steward Liao said, don't even think about it. I am a member of the human sovereign city. If you dare to hurt me, the human sovereign city will not accept you. As for you, woman, if you can submit to me, it might be a way out. Your IQ is a serious flaw. Yang Kai looked at him speechlessly. He was about to die, but he was still threatening him. He really didn't know what this guy was thinking. Zhu Qing shouted in a low voice, "Bow wow, bite him." When the little black dog heard the command, it was as if it was assisted by the gods. Its mouth suddenly split open and became incomparably huge. It actually swallowed Manager Liao into its stomach in one gulp. In the end, it even stretched out its large tongue to lick its mouth, looking as if it hadn't had enough. It was the first time Zhu Qing saw the black puppy use such a divine technique. She couldn't help but be stunned. She just wanted the black puppy to use more strength. She didn't expect it to swallow someone directly. What kind of divine technique was this? When the man and woman saw it, their expressions changed. They said in horror, "Demonic beast." It's really a demonic beast. They chased after the black puppy because they felt that it had the aura of a demonic beast. In the end, they confirmed that it was just their imagination. But now, it seemed that it wasn't an illusion. It was just that the black puppy hid its demonic chi too deeply. When it mutated just now, there was a very obvious demonic chi surging out, so they recognized it immediately. Chapter 2953. Yang Kai looked at them curiously and asked, "Do you recognize demonic beasts?" The man immediately shielded his wife behind him and looked at Yang Kai cautiously. "Are you from the demon race?" Yang Kai was really surprised this time. This guy could say the words demonic beasts and even knew about the demon race. This was very unusual. The man became even more vigilant and gritted his teeth. "You came from the Demon Fury City?" Yang Kai shook his head. "I don't know what the Demon Fury City is, and I don't know what the demon race is. You probably misunderstood." As he spoke, he suddenly frowned because he suddenly felt the world shake at this moment. The laws of heaven and earth that filled the surroundings seemed to be distorting and changing. He glanced at Zhu Qing and saw that Zhu Qing also had a look of surprise on her face. The laws of heaven and earth were really beginning to change, and it was definitely a huge change, which was why there were such obvious signs. "Just kill us." The man's face was ashen, and he no longer had any desire to live. Steward Liao was swallowed by a demonic beast, and two people who seemed to be from the demon race suddenly appeared in front of them. They were very strong, so there was no way they could survive. He hugged his wife tightly, and he just wanted to enjoy a moment of warmth before he died. "It's easy to die, I don't need to do it." Yang Kai stepped forward and walked in front of a spell formation. There was nothing else in this cave except for this spell formation, so it was very eye-catching. He pointed at the spell formation and said, "Can we teleport to the human sovereign city from here?" The man's eyes dimmed as he looked over and nodded, "Yes." Yang Kai released his divine sense and checked. A spatial spell formation. "But it seems to be a little different." The man said, "It's useless. If you want to activate this spell formation, you must have the seal of human sovereign. Don't you have the seal of human sovereign? Why don't you go?" Yang Kai turned to look at them. The man said, "It must be the seal of human sovereignty on Steward Liao's body. That's the master seal. Only the master seal can activate the operation of this formation. The seals on our bodies are only auxiliary seals. There's no way we can activate the formation." "I see." Yang Kai nodded. Seeing that he had yet to make a move and was instead studying the array seriously, Yi Zichen felt a chill run down his spine. The man hesitated and said, "Are you really not a member of the demon race?" Yang Kai replied while examining the formation, "Is there a demon race in this world?" The man said, "There is. Our human race and the demon race are at odds with each other. We have coexisted in this world for countless years. You don't look like a member of the demon race, but why do you have a magical beast by your side?" Yang Kai did not answer his question. The origin of the black puppy was a little strange, and it would be troublesome to explain. He asked, Humans and demons coexist. It must be hard for you to survive. The man said, the human sovereign city provided protection. If not for the human sovereign city, we wouldn't have been able to survive. Yang Kai said thoughtfully, is it related to the changes in the laws of heaven and earth? That's right. After a while, the laws of heaven and earth will change. When that time comes, our human race will not be able to move around freely, but the demon race will be able to move around freely. During this time, no one will dare to leave the human sovereign city. Otherwise, there's only a slim chance of survival. So the laws of heaven and earth before were suitable for the human race to survive, and the demon race had to go into hibernation? That's right. What a magical world. Yang Kai had a look of amazement. The man smiled bitterly and said, we were born here. No one knows why this world is like this. Perhaps only the master of the human sovereign city can understand. Human sovereign city. Yang Kai heard the man mention these two words several times. He couldn't help but think, is that the master of the human sovereign city? The man said solemnly, that's the master of the human race. He protects the human sovereign city and protects all humans. His words were full of respect, as if he held the human sovereign city in high esteem. Yang Kai smiled and continued to study the formation. The changes in the laws of heaven and earth became more and more obvious. A large amount of demonic chi and some other strange things appeared in the void around them. Although the couple used their power to form a layer of protection on the surface of their bodies, it wouldn't last long. However, it looked like it wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Once the protection was broken, it would immediately be eroded by the demonic chi and turn into a demonic creature. Zhu Qing was a member of the dragon race, so she didn't feel much. However, she still needed to use her dragon yuan to dispel the erosion of the demonic chi. Only the little black dog's eyes lit up. Its nose twitched, and it kept sniffing around excitedly. It had the bloodline of the return to ruins. It was the descendant of the mutated beasts in the territory of demons. When the demonic chi surged, it naturally felt a sense of familiarity and joy. All right, come over here. Yang Kai suddenly stood up and called out. Zhu Qing walked over with the little black dog in her arms and stood beside him. The couple hesitated. The man said, what are you going to do? I'm going to take you to the city of human sovereign city. The man was shocked. You don't have the seal of human sovereign. How are you going to go to the city of human sovereign city? Yang Kai sneered. Who told you that you can't go to the city of human sovereign city without the seal of human sovereign city? If you continue to dawdle, it'll be too late. Do you want to live or die? The man was still hesitating, but the woman pulled him back. The man finally made up his mind and said, all right, I'll trust you this time. Yang Kai grinned. I hope you can keep the matter with Steward Liao a secret. The man smiled bitterly. It won't do us any good to say it. Moreover, the city of human sovereign city has its ways of finding out the truth. In fact, I think it's best if you don't go to the city of human sovereign city. If you really do go in, it won't matter how strong you are. That's hard to say. When Yang Kai finished speaking, his expression suddenly became solemn. The law of space began to fluctuate. The four of them were standing in a space array that was connected to the city of human sovereign city. Under normal circumstances, someone like Steward Liao would brand the person who was teleporting with the seal of human sovereign. Then, he would activate the space array and teleport them. However, these complicated steps were only layers of disguise. They were the means the city of human sovereign city used to control the human race. In front of Yang Kai, who was proficient in the law of space, this disguise was easily stripped away. He directly used his mind and the law of space to open the other end of the space array, so there was no need for the seal of human sovereign. With a flash of light, the man and woman both stared with wide eyes, unable to believe that the space array was really operating. For a moment, they were unable to contain their joy, feeling as if they had just escaped death. The changes in the laws of heaven and earth around them were extremely obvious. The world's world energy had turned into demonic chi. In such an environment, it was indeed unsuitable for the human race to survive. Even if they were strong enough to temporarily resist the erosion of the demonic qi, if they lived in such an environment for a long time, there would be a moment when their strength would be exhausted. At that time, they would be eroded by the demonic qi, lose their reason, and become a demon. A moment later, the light in the cave receded and the 4 people on the space array disappeared. The clamor suddenly came from all directions, making them feel a little uncomfortable. Yang Kai looked around and found that they had arrived in a prosperous city. Below their feet was a huge space array, and on the space array, there were people who had just appeared walking down. Their cultivations varied, and their expressions varied. Some were overjoyed, some were gloomy, and some were seriously injured, gasping for air. These people were clearly like Yang Kai and the others. In order to avoid the changes in the laws of heaven and earth, they had just rushed back from the outside. Yang Kai saw many existences from the Emperor realm among them. The 4 of them stood on top of the space array and were not too conspicuous. The entire city seemed to be very prosperous. People were jostling shoulder to shoulder, and there was an endless stream of people. There were many shops all around, selling all kinds of specialties from this world. Sounds of shouting rang out one after another, giving people the feeling that they had accidentally intruded into the secular world. It was the first time Zhu Qing had come to such a lively place, so she couldn't help but be a little surprised and look around. Neatly dressed guards were walking down the street. Their footsteps were orderly, and they were dressed in the same uniform. At a glance, it was obvious that they were the guards of the human sovereign city. However, these guards didn't have high cultivations. The leader was a first-order Emperor Realm Master, and the rest were all Dao Source Realm cultivators. However, many cultivator on the street, no matter how strong or weak their cultivations were, avoided them like snakes or scorpions, as if they were very afraid of them. Yang Kai clearly saw a second-order Emperor Realm Master make way for them. This world didn't seem to be divided by cultivation. The man and woman from before were clearly weaker than him, but they didn't show the slightest bit of respect for the strong. As for Manager Liao, it was even more obvious. His cultivation was lower than anyone else's, but he could order the man and woman around and make them cower in fear. Some people flew by in the sky. There weren't many of them, and their cultivations were uneven. Farewell, both of you. Take care. The man seemed to be in a hurry to separate from Yang Kai and Zhu Qing, so as not to be implicated by them, so he immediately said goodbye as soon as he came back to his senses. Yang Kai sensed his thoughts and nodded casually. The woman suddenly said, "I'll give you 2 a piece of advice. Don't provoke those with a leaf symbol embroidered on their chests. The more leaves there are, the more noble their identity is. This isn't your original world, and it's not a place where the strong preys on the weak. Also, Manager Liao's death probably won't be hidden for long. You'd better leave the human sovereign city when the world principles change next time." "Many thanks." Yang Kai smiled slightly. When the woman wanted to say something else, the man had already pulled her into the crowd and soon disappeared. "It's really an interesting world." Yang Kai looked around with great interest. The entire human sovereign city seemed to be shrouded by a layer of inexplicable restrictions. That restriction was absolutely magnificent because inside the human sovereign city, one couldn't feel the changes of the world principles in the outside world at all. The world principles here were almost the same as those in the astral boundary. Looking up, one could see the chaos in the sky, as if there were countless vortexes that could swallow one's vision. After staring for a long time, one would feel dizzy. "Is Zhu Lai here?" Yang Kai looked at Zhu Qing and asked. Zhu Qing said, "We need to find a place to use the secret technique to be sure." "I hope he's here too." Yang Kai smiled and said, "Don't worry, he's quite strong. Even if he's outside, he'll be fine for a while." Zhu Qing nodded slightly and subconsciously stroked the little black dog in her arms. Bo Wao was very satisfied, squinting his eyes and looking comfortable. No one knew whether Manager Liao, who was swallowed into his stomach, was dead or alive. Chapter 2954. Get out of the way, get out of the way. Just as Yang Kai was silently observing the surroundings, an extremely rude shout suddenly came from behind him. He turned his head and saw a large group of people suddenly emerge from the huge space array. There were more than a dozen of them, and all of them had extraordinary cultivation. One of the men was the most conspicuous. He looked to be in his early 20s. He was handsome and had an arrogant expression. His pair of red phoenix eyes contained a lofty majesty, and he was wearing a moon-white cloak. The rest of the people scattered around and surrounded him like stars surrounding the moon. As soon as this group of people appeared, they walked in a certain direction. The leading cultivator opened the way in front and rudely pushed the people who blocked the way. The people who were pushed didn't dare to resist at all. Instead, they ran to the side in fear. "It's His Highness the Third Prince. His Highness the Third Prince is back. Hurry up and kneel down. Don't talk and don't look at him. It's over if you're targeted by him." The crowd fell to their knees in an uproar. No matter whether they were male or female, old or young, or whether they were strong or weak, within a radius of 1,000 feet around the teleportation array, no matter what they were doing, they all prostrated themselves on the ground to show respect. Yang Kai was dumbfounded. He was curiously sizing up this so-called third prince, listening to the whispers about him, and secretly wondering what a prince was. Because it seemed that such a title only existed in those kingdoms in the secular world. He had basically never heard of such a title among the cultivator community. Tens of thousands of people were kneeling around him. Only he and Zhu Qing were standing in the same place. Zhu Qing was holding a little black dog in her arms. All of a sudden, it seemed particularly unconventional. He sighed slightly. He knew it was bad. Before he completely understood the situation of this reincarnation world and the city of human sovereignty, he didn't want to cause trouble. However, most of the things in life didn't go his way. If he didn't cause trouble, trouble would come to him. He helplessly glanced at Zhu Qing. Zhu Qing smiled. The abnormal behavior of Yang Kai and Zhu Qing instantly attracted the attention of that group of people. The leading cultivator in the front came in front of Yang Kai in a few steps. This guy was tall, like an iron tower, giving people a strong sense of oppression. He looked down at Yang Kai condescendingly and said in a low voice, "Boy, why don't you kneel in front of His Highness the Third Prince?" While they were talking, an extremely strong pressure emanated from the man's body, pressing down on Yang Kai. He was a First-Order Emperor Realm Master, and he seemed to have been on the battlefield for a long time, so his Emperor pressure had a strong bloodthirsty aura to it. Anyone who came into contact with it would immediately tremble in fear and lose most of their will to resist. Yang Kai was indifferent. He was still standing there. It seemed that only a gentle breeze was blowing his hair. He looked at the brawny man and said, "A country bumpkin has not seen much of the world and does not understand etiquette. Please don't blame me, Master. We will leave now." While speaking, he was about to leave with Zhu Qing. It didn't matter if this was the third prince or any of the other princes, it was impossible for him to kneel. As for Zhu Qing, it was even more impossible. She was a member of the dragon race. Even if she died, she would not kneel to a mortal. So, it was better to leave first to avoid more trouble. Unfortunately, he didn't get what he wanted. Seeing that Yang Kai was about to leave, the brawny man glared at him and shouted, "How dare you!" Like a mad bull, his big palm slapped down on Yang Kai's shoulder. With a loud bang, Yang Kai's body was as steady as Mount Tai, but a violent force spread from his body to his feet, shattering the stone floor. Yang Kai rolled his eyes, glanced at the brawny man, and said lazily, "Master, what is the meaning of this?" The brawny man showed a surprised expression and grinned, "No wonder you are so arrogant. It turns out that you have some skill. Unfortunately, you have met me." As he spoke, the strength in his hand suddenly became more violent. Blue veins bulged on his thick neck, as if he was using all his strength to push Yang Kai to the ground. Yang Kai glanced at the others and saw that the remaining guards were looking at him coldly. They seemed to think that he had committed some taboo and had to be punished. The third prince, on the other hand, had a cold look on his face and didn't care much about him. However, when he saw Zhu Qing, a look of surprise flashed across his eyes, but that was it, and he didn't pay any more attention to him. His gaze crossed the crowd and half of the human sovereign city and stared at a certain spot with a fiery light shining in his eyes. He was still standing here, probably waiting for his subordinates to teach Yang Kai a lesson, so that the residents of the human sovereign city would know the price of offending him and learn to respect their superiors. The brawny man was still putting pressure on Yang Kai. At first, he had a look of confidence on his face because he also noticed that Yang Kai was only a first-order Emperor Realm Master. In the case of the same cultivation, he wasn't afraid of any opponent, let alone this inexplicable brat in front of him. But as time passed and his Emperor Qi surged, his face gradually became ugly, because no matter how hard he pushed, he couldn't shake this brat in front of him at all. It was as if this brat had taken root in the ground, and there wasn't even a trace of him moving. After a while, the brawny man's face turned red and his tower-like body began to tremble. Obviously, he was a little weak, but he was riding a tiger and couldn't get off, so he could only hold on. He had greatly underestimated his opponent. Yang Kai's face darkened slightly as he looked past the brawny man and stared at the third prince. It's a virtue to know when to stop. The third prince turned a deaf ear to him, his eyes still fixed on a certain spot in the human sovereign city, as if his whole mind was immersed in it and he could no longer perceive anything. Yang Kai snorted and raised his hand to slap the brawny man. He had already secretly warned this third prince, but since the other party didn't take it seriously, there was no need for him to care about other people's face. As for the consequences of slapping someone's face, who cares, he'll just have to enjoy himself first. Everything had happened too quickly, and the brawny man hadn't thought that Kai Yang would actually fight back. By the time the palm had reached him, it was already too late for him to defend himself. Not to mention, his mind had been preoccupied with how to suppress Kai Yang, so how could he have the time to gather his strength to defend himself? This light palm seemed harmless, but it caused the brawny man's expression to change drastically. His whole body flew high into the air like a kite before landing heavily on the ground. Everyone was shocked. Those kneeling on the ground secretly looked up and immediately cried out in alarm when they saw this scene. Obviously, none of them had expected this to happen. In the human sovereign city, there was actually someone who dared to clash with the third prince's guard, and in the presence of the third prince. This person was probably out of his mind to do such a stupid thing. It was a pity that the beautiful woman beside him would also suffer. Who knew what would happen to her? Although the third prince's guards were shocked by Yang Kai's counterattack, they reacted extremely quickly. Without saying a word, they rushed forward and instantly surrounded Yang Kai and Zhu Qing. Among these guards, there was one second-order Emperor Realm Master, two first-order Emperor Realm Masters, and the rest were all from the third-order Dao Source Realm. Each of them had a strong foundation and it wasn't surprising that they could break through at any time. Although Yang Kai hadn't been here for long, the quantity and quality of the Emperor Realm in the human sovereign city still surprised him. He didn't know how the cultivator here cultivated, but it seemed to be very common in the Emperor Realm. Such a lineup of guards could be considered luxurious, especially when the third prince himself was also a first-order Emperor Realm Master. Many masters surrounded them but didn't attack. They were just waiting for the third prince's order. As long as the third prince said the word kill, they would immediately pounce on Yang Kai and Zhu Qing and tear them to pieces. No matter how strong these two were, provoking a prince in the human sovereign city wouldn't end well for them. Surrounded like this, Yang Kai was calm and collected. The corner of his mouth curled into a sneer. Zhu Qing also bent down and put down the black puppy, standing quietly beside Yang Kai. "Did you just come from outside?" The third prince suddenly retracted his gaze and asked Yang Kai. "Is it that obvious?" Yang Kai frowned. He was a little surprised that this guy would ask about this. The third prince said lightly, "If you had stayed here for a few more days, you would have understood that it's not a wise move to start a conflict with a prince in the human sovereign city." Yang Kai grinned, "So that's how it is. The third prince really has sharp eyes." "That's right, my husband and I did just come from outside." The third prince gently nodded his head and said, "The outside world has its own rules, and this place has its own rules. I'll let it go this time, but I hope that you can follow the local customs next time." After saying that, he gave Yang Kai a deep look and walked straight past him. The guards surrounding Yang Kai and Zhu Qing heard their master's words and didn't have any intention of making things difficult for them. They immediately turned around and followed him. Even the brawny man who was sent flying by Yang Kai didn't look at them when he passed by them, as if he hadn't fought with Yang Kai at all. That's right. After walking a dozen steps, the third prince suddenly stopped and said without looking back, I'll let you know that I'm letting you go not because you've shown enough strength, but because it's your first offense and I'm giving you a chance to turn over a new leaf. Yang Kai frowned slightly and moved his lips towards Zhu Qing. Although there was no sound or sound transmission, Zhu Qing still understood the meaning of Yang Kai's words. This guy is really arrogant. Zhu Qing covered her mouth and giggled. Pa! The third prince seemed to casually snap his fingers. Yang Kai's face suddenly changed and he let out a groan. Zhu Qing's beautiful face paled as she stared nervously at Yang Kai and said, You're bleeding. Saying so, she hurriedly took out a silk scarf from her space ring and placed it under Yang Kai's nose. Yang Kai reached out and took the silk scarf, covering his nose as he stared incredulously at the third prince walking away. Why are you bleeding? Zhu Qing frowned, puzzled. She had watched the conflict from beginning to end and hadn't seen any signs of injury on Yang Kai, but Yang Kai still had a nosebleed. This was obviously abnormal. Let's find a place to talk. Yang Kai's expression was dignified as he pulled Zhu Qing away. The surrounding residents of the human sovereign city slowly got up and moved to the sides, as if avoiding snakes or scorpions. Chapter 2955. In a tea house, high-quality tea was being steamed, exuding a unique fragrance. Yang Kai and Zhu Qing sat opposite each other, while the black puppy rested on a corner of the table, its eyes closed. What happened just now? Zhu Qing asked in a low voice. Even now, she still couldn't figure out how Yang Kai was injured. Although the injury wasn't serious, it was still bleeding. It was impossible to say that it was the third prince's doing. She knew very well how strong Yang Kai was. How could a trivial first-order Emperor Realm Master injure him? And all it took was a snap of his fingers. If the third prince really had this ability, then he wouldn't be far from the great emperors. This human sovereign city isn't simple. Yang Kai loosened the scarf covering his nostrils. The blood had stopped, but the scarf was a mess, so he put it away. Zhu Qing was shocked. Was it really the third prince who injured you? Yes, Yang Kai nodded. How is that possible? Zhu Qing's expression changed slightly. Could it be that he was hiding his strength? She was shocked. What kind of master was hiding his strength that even she couldn't see through? If there really was such a person, then his strength was too terrifying. No. Yang Kai shook his head. That guy wasn't hiding his strength. His strength is that of a first-order Emperor Realm Master. Then how could it be? Zhu Qing's mouth opened slightly. How do I put it? Yang Kai frowned as he recalled the scene just now. After a long time, he said, there is an extremely strong force in the human sovereign city, and the third prince seems to be able to control this force at will. It wasn't the third prince who injured me, but that omnipresent force. Although this was a bit awkward, the meaning was very clear. Zhu Qing naturally understood, so she asked in a daze, what kind of force is that? I don't know. Yang Kai shook his head. Do you remember the woman who warned us not to provoke people with leaves on their chests? Zhu Qing patted the table and said, the third prince seems to have a leaf symbol on his clothes. Yang Kai grinned, and it's the symbol of a 9-leaf cultivator. He then pointed to the sky and said, you may not have noticed, but the people flying in the sky all have a leaf symbol on their chests. It's just that there are different numbers. Hearing what he said, Zhu Qing quickly released her divine sense to investigate. She found that it was indeed the case. Among the people flying in the sky, no matter how strong they were, none of them were ordinary people. All of them had the symbol of a tree leaf embroidered on their chests. These people probably have a very special status in the human sovereign city. That's why they're this, SSS, SSSS, SSS, SSSSS, this, and this. Zhu Qing frowned and said, isn't there a bit too many royal relatives? Yang Kai said with a smile, that's why most of those fellows only have 1 or 2 leaves. It's rare to see someone with more than 5 leaves. The third prince, for example, is a 9-leaf cultivator. It seems like he's someone with authority. Zhu Qing said, I remember now. Steward Liao, who was in the cave before, seemed to have a similar symbol on his chest. Not bad. Yang Kai nodded. That's why he's able to control the space array over there. That's why he has the master seal of the human sovereignty. Even if the couple is stronger than him, they have no choice but to swallow their pride. TSK. It's good to have special privileges. What are you thinking? Zhu Qing looked at him coldly. Yang Kai said solemnly, what I'm trying to say is that only the royal relatives can mobilize the mysterious power in the city. That's why they can easily defeat those who are stronger than them. Naturally, I don't think every royal relative has such an ability. Perhaps, there are some limitations. For example, only those with more than 5 or 6 leaves are qualified to do so. The more leaves they have, the more power they can mobilize. You seem to have a point. Zhu Qing did not think too much about it. She did not think there was anything wrong with Yang Kai's words. Yang Kai sneered. At the end of the day, it's still the law of the jungle. It's just that some people here can borrow a special power. This power seems to be everywhere in the city of human sovereignty. Can we stop it? Zhu Qing asked. Yang Kai shook his head. I can't say for sure. Earlier, the third prince didn't go all out, and I wasn't prepared for it. Hence, I don't know if I'll be able to stop it if it really comes down to it. The most important thing now is to figure out what the hell that power is. Only then can we deal with the problem. Should we ask around? Zhu Qing suggested. Yang Kai smiled and shook his head. There's no need for that. Why? Because, someone's coming to us on a silver platter, little fool. Yang Kai smiled at her. Zhu Qing said angrily, you're the little fool. Yang Kai's words reminded her that ever since she entered the city of human sovereignty, her IQ seemed to have dropped. When she thought about it, it was probably because she felt like she had someone to rely on. Hence, her judgment and observation skills had plummeted. She did not feel good about this, but she did not reject this feeling. Master, since you're here, why don't you come and sit with us? Why are you all alone without anyone to talk to? Yang Kai suddenly turned his head and looked at a table not far away. There was only one customer at that table. He looked to be in his 50s, had a goatee, and had a refined appearance. At first glance, he looked like a teacher. His cultivation was restrained, and his aura was ethereal. It was impossible to judge his strength. This guy entered the tea house right after Yang Kai. When he heard Yang Kai's words, the goatee did not hesitate. He stood up and sat down. He did not look at Yang Kai or Zhu Qing. Instead, he was interested in the little black dog that was lying on the table, pretending to be asleep. The aroma of tea filled the room. Yang Kai picked up the teapot and filled his cup. He said, "What's your name, sir?" The goatee picked up the teacup and drank it in one gulp. He said calmly, "A good dog." Yang Kai smiled. "It's just a little mutt. What's so good about it?" "You flatter me." The little black dog did not have any special characteristics. As long as it did not reveal its return to Ruin's bloodline, no one would notice anything unusual. The goatee shook his head. "I'm not talking about it." Yang Kai raised his eyebrows. "If you're not talking about it, then you're talking about me." The goatee stroked his beard and said calmly, "You're worth teaching." Zhu Qing's face turned cold. She immediately wanted to teach this old man a lesson. This old man did not know what he was talking about. He actually dared to insult her man in front of her. How could Zhu Qing tolerate this? Yang Kai gave her a look, telling her to calm down. He laughed. "Sir, you're really interesting. I'm a human. How can you compare me to a dog?" The goatee said, "Sometimes a human is not as good as a dog. A human has its disadvantages, but a dog has its advantages." Yang Kai sneered. "Then which family's dog is it?" "The third prince's family." The goatee's face turned cold, but he did not flare up. He nodded. "You're right." Yang Kai said, "I've heard people say that a dog that bites doesn't bark, and a dog that barks is trash. It seems like you're a good dog." Zhu Qing snorted. "Don't compare him to Bow Wow. Bow Wow is much better than him." She seized every opportunity to vent the anger in her heart. Reaching out, She hugged the black puppy and gently combed its fur. The goatee said, "It's not up to me to decide if I'm a good dog. It's up to the third prince. If he thinks you're a good dog, then you're a good dog. If he thinks you're not, then no matter how strong you are, you're still a dead dog." Yang Kai narrowed his eyes. "Sir, are you here to beat the dog and eat its meat, or do you have other plans?" The goatee pushed the teacup in front of Yang Kai and motioned for him to fill it. He said calmly, "Dog meat doesn't taste good. The third prince isn't interested." Yang Kai said, "Oh, so you're here to recruit a hunting dog. Whether it's a hunting dog or a domestic animal depends on your performance." The goatee picked up the teacup again and took a sip. "It's rare to see strong people from the outside. The third prince thinks you're not bad, so he's willing to give you this opportunity. Whether you can seize this opportunity or not depends on your performance." Yang Kai laughed and shook his head. "I'm sorry. Sir, you're ambitious. It's your freedom to be someone else's domestic dog. I don't think the same as you. My wife and I don't want to do anything. We just want to raise a dog. We're not interested in being a dog." The goatee put down the teacup. His expression didn't change. He seemed to have expected this. He nodded and said, "I've heard some things about the outside world. Maybe you used to be a tyrant and can call the wind and summon the rain. But this is the human sovereign city. It has its own rules. An outsider like you will always have to suffer some losses before you understand the rules of the human sovereign city." As he spoke, he stood up and casually threw down a wooden token. He said, "This is the third prince's token. If you can escape this calamity, then you have the qualifications to become the third prince's hunting dogs. If you don't, then it means that you're nothing more than this." When he finished speaking, he floated away. At the same time, a dozen figures rushed in from all directions, surrounding the tea house. Seeing this, the other customers in the tea house turned pale with fright and hurriedly fled. The owner of the tea house looked at this sudden scene with an expression of wanting to cry, but he didn't dare to act rashly, because he recognized the identity of these people. Yang Kai rubbed his head and said with a headache, "What do you mean by giving a day to club?" Zhu Qing looked around coldly and said, "They don't seem to be the same people." Yang Kai suddenly said, "If there's the third prince, then there must be the first prince and second prince, right? I don't know which group they are from. It seems that they're not as united as before." The two of them didn't try to hide their voices, so the cultivators gathered around the tea house could hear them clearly, but all of them remained indifferent. No one stood up to explain anything to Yang Kai, as if they were waiting for someone to appear. They were indeed waiting for someone. Not long after, there was another sound on the street. Then, a huge palanquin came from the other end of the street. The people carrying the palanquin were all Dao Source Realm cultivators. They didn't move at all and the palanquin flew steadily. Chapter 2956. The bed and palanquin were extremely luxurious, with a translucent pink curtain that gave off a hazy feeling of extravagance. There were two people in the palanquin, a man and two women, all of whom were reclining on the palanquin. There was good wine and fresh fruit on the couch. The man was hugging the women in each arm, taking a sip of wine and eating a spirit fruit, looking very comfortable. The two women were wearing very little, exposing a large part of their snow-white skin. They were wriggling in his arms, acting coquettishly, vaguely competing for his affection. The man acted as if there was no one around, his two big hands groping and ravaging the two women's delicate bodies, causing them to gasp from time to time. The people along the way all knelt down, not daring to raise their heads, not knowing that there was an endless romantic scene in the palanquin. Only the women's seductive voices entered their ears, making them feel as if their bellies were on fire. In the blink of an eye, the bed and palanquin arrived in front of the tea house. Before the palanquin landed, the Dao Source Realm bearers stood there with straight backs. The surroundings were quiet, and the obscene sounds from the palanquin became more and more abrupt. Yang Kai opened his eyes wide, watching with great interest. Zhu Qing blushed slightly and coldly snorted, but when she saw Yang Kai's bewitched look, she couldn't help but kick him under the table and glare at him. "What are you looking at? If you keep looking, Your eyeballs will fall out. Yang Kai grimaced and said to her, Qing you look so good when you're jealous. Nonsense, Zhu Qing's face turned even redder. Who's jealous? The two of them flirted with each other as if no one was around, causing the surrounding cultivators to look on coldly. A burly, bald man walked into the tea house. He looked like a lackey, but his cultivation was quite good. He was a second-order Emperor Realm Master, and his aura was profound. He stared coldly at Yang Kai and Zhu Qing and shouted, The first prince has arrived, why aren't you kneeling? It's really a prince. Yang Kai and Zhu Qing looked at each other. He had just said it casually. They didn't expect that the person who came was really a prince. He and Zhu Qing had only been in the city of human sovereign for less than half an hour, and they had only had a small conflict with the third prince's people at the space magic array. They didn't expect that the first prince would appear so soon. Although the third prince had taught him a lesson, he still sent people over. Undoubtedly, he wanted to recruit him as his subordinate. He wondered what the first prince was up to this time. However, when Yang Kai saw the first prince's posture, he had a vague guess. He immediately felt a little displeased, and his tone became very unfriendly. Sorry, this young master does not have the habit of kneeling to others. If you have something to say, say it. If not, scram. Hearing this, the bald man was furious and shouted, Impudent. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and was about to make a move. However, a soft voice came from the palanquin. Stop. What if you hurt the beauty? When the bald man heard this, he immediately stopped. However, he glared fiercely at Yang Kai. The voice from the palanquin said, Beauty, let me introduce myself. I am the first prince of the city of human sovereign, Fushu. Are you interested in coming with this prince to play? Zhu Qing didn't answer, but the two women in Fushu's arms were unhappy. One of them climbed onto Fushu's body and took a sip of wine. She said coquettishly, The first prince is so bad. It's not enough to have us sisters to serve you. You actually want to find someone else. How annoying. The other woman also said sweetly, That's right, first prince. What's so good about this woman's cold face? How can she be as considerate as us sisters who serve you wholeheartedly? First prince, don't pay attention to her. I don't know where this country bumpkin came from. Let's go back to the palace. My sister and I recently came up with a good idea that will definitely satisfy the first prince. The first imperial prince swallowed the fine wine and felt as if his entire body was as light as a feather. His two large hands forcefully pinched the soft and tender bodies of the two women beside him, causing them to let out a soft moan. He chuckled and said, The two of you are indeed good, but she is not bad either. This imperial prince will take her in and let her be your sister. No, we already have enough sisters. First prince, you can't accept any more. That's right. I can't even count all those sisters. First prince, you just promised this servant a few days ago that you won't fool around anymore. How can you go back on your word in just a few days? This person won't listen. The first prince laughed dryly and said, Yes. This prince did say those words before, but at that time, this beauty didn't exist. I will accept one more, and one more. I definitely won't accept any more in the future. First prince is lying. This person doesn't believe you. Don't, first prince. There's nothing special about this woman. Oh, she has a head of red hair. If first prince likes it, us sisters can also dye our red hair red and wave it in front of you every day so that you can see as much as you want. How is that the same? Fushu shook his head and said, You don't know. Although this beauty doesn't look special, I heard that she came from the outside world. This prince has seen countless women, but this is the first time I've met one from the outside world. Naturally, I can't let her go so easily. She came from the outside world? What's so strange about that? Women are all the same. First prince, that's enough. Shut up. Fushu's tone suddenly became cold. The two women who were acting coquettishly suddenly fell silent. They understood their status and position in the first prince's eyes. They were just playthings. It didn't matter if they acted coquettishly from time to time because he doted on them. However, If they insisted on stopping the first prince from seeking pleasure, they would immediately fall out of favor. There were countless beauties in the first prince's residence. It wasn't necessary for the two of them to serve him. Thus, when they felt that the first prince's tone was not right, the two women didn't dare to disobey. One of them immediately changed her tone and said, "Since first prince likes her so much, then just accept her. It's just one more sister. As long as first prince is happy, anything is fine." Sister is right. I think this woman's appearance is also not bad. She is barely qualified to serve first prince. Fushu immediately smiled and kissed the two women on their cheeks. He laughed and said, "You two are the most reasonable. This prince didn't dote on you for nothing." The two women wriggled in the first prince's arms. The woman who spoke first said, "But this beauty seems to already have someone in her heart." "First prince, what are you going to do?" Fushu smiled and said, "That's because she doesn't know how powerful this prince is. Once she has tasted this prince's methods, why would she think of another man? Look carefully, this prince will go and subdue her right now." As he spoke, he broke free from the two women. He straightened his disheveled clothes and stood up from the palanquin. He opened the curtains and stepped down. After entering the tea house, he looked up at Zhu Qing. His heart immediately burst with joy when he saw her. He didn't get a good look at her from behind the curtains. Now, he saw that this red-haired woman was simply too beautiful. Although her expression was cold, it was enough to incite a man's desire to conquer her. As he had said before, he had never tried a foreign beauty before. It wasn't that he didn't have enough power, but rather that no one had entered the human sovereign city for many years. He was the first prince. In the human sovereign city, he was second only to the emperor. If he wanted a beauty, he only had to give the order and someone would immediately arrange it for him. None of the women dared to resist. They all did their best to please him. After getting used to eating delicacies, it was a kind of happiness to occasionally have a change of taste. Thus, the colder Zhu Qing's expression was, the more he liked it. Deep in his heart, he wanted nothing more than to bring this red-haired beauty back to the prince's mansion and dote on her. His fiery gaze was like a leech biting onto Zhu Qing's face. He began to move his gaze without restraint, wanting to examine her from head to toe. Yang Kai's figure flashed and stood in front of Zhu Qing. The first prince's expression immediately changed. It was as if he had seen a lump of stink. He said with disdain, "What's your name?" Without waiting for Yang Kai to reply, Fushu said, "I don't care what your name is. If you want to live, then scram. Seeing that you have done a good deed, this prince will bestow upon you a one-leaf body." As soon as these words were said, the surrounding cultivators all had fiery expressions. A one-leaf body. Although it was the lowest level of nobility, it was still nobility. In the city of human sovereignty, one would be able to enjoy special privileges that ordinary people could not. In an instant, one would be able to rise above the commoners. These people had followed the first prince for many years, but none of them had ever received such a reward. They did not expect that this outsider would receive such an honor just because he had a beauty by his side. This made many of the first prince's attendants green with envy. They secretly sighed at this brat's good luck. The bald man took a step forward and shouted angrily at Yang Kai, "Brat, why aren't you thanking us and leaving? Do you want to die?" Yang Kai sighed dejectedly. He looked seriously at the first prince and said, Your Highness the first prince, this lowly one has a deep relationship with my wife. I don't want to be separated, and I don't have any intentions of offering her beauty. Your Highness the first prince is extremely powerful and has countless beauties by your side. I think the two in the sedan are quite good. Why do you have to set your sights on a married woman? If word gets out, it will damage your Highness's reputation." Fushu said with a cold face, "Are you insulting my intelligence, or insulting your own?" Yang Kai's mouth twitched. He also felt that his proposal was too childish. Fushu said, "This prince also does not want to bully others. How about this, if you think the two in the sedan are good, then I will give them to you. The one behind you is mine." As soon as this was said, the two women in the sedan were as if they had been struck by lightning. They suddenly became very stiff, but they did not dare to say anything. For a moment, their expressions were miserable, and they cried. Yang Kai said in surprise, "This. Won't the first prince lose out?" Fushu snorted, "This prince is a magnanimous master. What's wrong with letting you take advantage of me?" Yang Kai said, "But I have no interest in taking what others like. I only want to be with this lowly one." Fushu waved his hand and said impatiently, "Then just treat it as a reward. There is no need to thank me." Yang Kai opened his mouth, but he did not know what to say. Zhu Qing said behind him, "He is staring at me and won't let go. What are you going to do?" Yang Kai grinned and revealed a bright smile. "What else can I do? Since he is here, then I will beat him." Chapter 2957. Someone from the Third Order Dao Source Realm dares to act presumptuously in front of this young master? Yang Kai sneered as he raised his hand and slapped Fushu mercilessly. He could see that although the human sovereign city was safe and unaffected by the changes in world principles, it was in fact a pool of muddy water. If he and Zhu Qing, two outsiders, wanted to establish themselves here, they would have to show extraordinary strength and let others know that they were not to be trifled with. The strong preyed on the weak, this was the law of the jungle, and if it changed, it meant that they were not strong enough. Fushu's strength was not high, only in the Third Order Dao Source realm, but Yang Kai's eyes were sharp enough to see that this guy's cultivation was exaggerated. He should have taken some pills or emperor artifacts to forcefully increase his cultivation, so it was impossible for him to display his full strength. Furthermore, this crown prince looked like he was addicted to wine and women, so it was likely that he had already been hollowed out. This kind of guy, Kai Yang could casually kill dozens or even hundreds of them. However, Fushu did not have the slightest self-awareness. At this moment, he was only 10 meters away from Yang Kai, so once he attacked, he would not have any time to react. His emperor chi surged, and the world energy fluctuated as a huge palm visible to the naked eye slammed down on Fushu. The bald man's expression changed greatly as he shouted, "Stop! Stop your mother's hand!" Yang Kai cursed, his hand did not stop moving, becoming more and more violent. Fushu really didn't have time to react, he stuck his head out to take a look at the beautiful woman behind Kai Yang. Only when the palm was about to hit him did he suddenly cry out in fear, his whole body stiffening and trembling, he didn't know what to do. Seeing that this palm was about to smash the talisman pivot into powder. A green light suddenly appeared on the surface of his body. It suddenly formed a layer of protection, wrapping Fushu completely. Hong, the protection shattered, and Fushu's hair danced wildly, his body in a sorry state, but he was unharmed. What the hell is that? Kai Yang was dumbfounded. Just a moment ago, he didn't see any trace of the talisman shoe casting a spell, but that protective shield had strangely appeared. Looking up and down, it also didn't seem like he was wearing any kind of artifact. On the contrary, he was wearing a lot of useless pendants, which could only be used as decoration. The bald man had already charged out from the side. A light flashed in his hand and a sledgehammer suddenly appeared. The sledgehammer was half the size of a table. It was flickering with a dazzling light, giving off an extremely dangerous feeling. The bald man shouted angrily, "You dare to be rude to the first prince? Die, brat!" His muscles bulged as he held the sledgehammer in one hand. He exerted all his strength and smashed it down on Yang Kai's head. In a split second, the sound of wind and thunder filled their ears, making them tremble in fear. "Escort the emperor. Protect them," Yang Kai shouted. Zhu Qing glared at him. While her red hair was fluttering, her petite body flashed and stood beside Yang Kai. Then she raised a small white fist and met the sledgehammer head-on. The bald man's expression changed again as he shouted, "Get out of my way." He didn't know why this red-haired woman wanted to kill herself, but he knew the power of his attack. This woman's cultivation seemed to be quite good, but she was still a delicate woman. If she was hit by his sledgehammer, even if she didn't die, she would be seriously injured. This was a woman the first prince had taken a fancy to. How could he dare to kill her? He had used all his strength before. Now, even if he wanted to withdraw, it was too late. Seeing Zhu Qing in front of him, he could only twist his body and move the sledgehammer a little, hoping that the woman could escape. Zhu Qing's fist smashed into the sledgehammer. Her small fist and the sledgehammer created an extremely strong visual impact. No one doubted that Zhu Qing's fate would be miserable. However, the result was shocking. With a loud bang, Zhu Qing's body didn't move. Her hair fluttered wildly in the wind. The bald man holding the sledgehammer stared as if he had been struck by lightning. His entire body froze for a moment before he was sent flying like lightning. Hong long long, the walls of the tea house and the building next door were filled with holes. As far as the eye could see, dust filled the air. The bald man fell into a pile of rubble, motionless. Everyone's eyes almost popped out of their sockets, especially the guards who had come with the first prince. They all stared at Zhu Qing in a daze. They never thought that this seemingly soft and delicate body could explode with such destructive power. This was even more inconceivable than seeing a demon race jumping around in the human sovereign city. Zhu Qing waved her hand with a look of disdain. Outside the tea house, the two seductive women on the palanquin screamed in horror. How many years had the human sovereign city been peaceful? No one had ever dared to cause trouble in the city, let alone have a conflict with the first prince. Suddenly seeing such a big scene, the two women were naturally frightened. Their faces turned pale and their delicate bodies trembled. The screams woke up the dazed Fu Shu. He was stunned for a while before he suddenly woke up. He gritted his teeth and shouted at Yang Kai, "You hit me?" His tone was much harsher and became somewhat hysterical. "You dare hit me? This prince? That's right, you're the one I'm going to hit." Yang Kai reached out and grabbed the myriad's sword in the air. He slashed down at Fu Shu's head. The sword light was biting cold, and the sword intent was awe-inspiring. Fu Shu was so frightened that he screamed and ran away like a rat. The myriad's sword chased after Fu Shu like a maggot. The sword light slashed at Fu Shu's body, but it did not cause him any harm. Every time the sword light came, a green light would appear on Fu Shu's body and block the attack. If Yang Kai was strong, it would be strong. If Yang Kai was weak, it would be weak. It was as if it had a mind of its own. No matter what, it would protect the first Prince Fu Shu's safety. Even someone as strong as Yang Kai was unable to break through the green light. He clicked his tongue in wonder. The world was so big that nothing was too strange. If he had not accidentally come to this reincarnation world and entered the city of human sovereign city, he would not have known that such a thing existed in this world. "Help, help!" the first prince shouted as he ran. He no longer had the dignity of a prince. At this moment, he was just an ordinary person running for his life. He had even forgotten that he had once cultivated. His guards finally reacted and rushed towards Yang Kai to protect their master. Although these guards were not weak, how could they be Yang Kai's opponent? The myriad's sword cut down one by one like cutting vegetables. However, Yang Kai did not kill them. Although the tea house was full of blood and screams, there was no danger to their lives. However, Yang Kai's ferocious appearance had scared the first prince out of his wits. He did not even have the strength to run. He was blocked in a corner of the tea house. He looked at Yang Kai in horror as he walked towards him step by step. He trembled and shouted, "Don't come here, don't come here. I am the first prince. I order you to stop." Yang Kai smiled sinisterly. Blood dripped from the myriad's sword, making him look like a demon from hell. The first prince wished that he could just faint and be done with it. However, the fear in his heart made him more clear-headed than usual. After a few steps, Yang Kai stood in front of the first prince. He tilted his head and looked at him. Then, Myriad's sword slowly stabbed towards him. The first prince sucked in a breath of cold air and held his breath. He stared at the tip of Myriad's sword in horror. When Myriad's sword was about an inch away from Fu Shu, the green hazy light appeared again. It wrapped around Myriad's sword tenaciously and blocked its advance. The stronger the opponent, the stronger the light. Yang Kai used Myriad's sword to point at the green shield. He looked down at Fu Shu and asked, "What is this?" Fu Shu's 2 rows of teeth were chattering. He could no longer answer Yang Kai's question. A voice came from the side. With the protection of the holy tree, the imperial family will not be harmed. Yang Kai turned his head and saw that the man with the goatee who had just left had appeared in the tea house again. He was still sitting in the same position as before. It was as if he had never moved. He stared at him indifferently. Yang Kai raised his eyebrows. With the protection of the holy tree? What holy tree? The man with the goatee said, "It has nothing to do with you, and it has nothing to do with me. I hate people like you the most. What do you want?" Yang Kai looked at him impatiently. The man with the goatee said, "You have offended the first prince and injured so many of his guards. You have also frightened the first prince. There is no place for you in the human sovereign city. I'm so scared." Yang Kai sneered. "Are you going to tell me that if I want to live, I should quickly go and lick the feet of the third prince? Only he can protect my safety." The man with the goatee smiled. "Smart people understand." Yang Kai snorted. "It seems that everything that has happened here is within your expectations. You were the one who brought the first prince here, right?" The man with the goatee shook his head. "Don't accuse me wrongly. The first prince's desire to chase after beauties is well known. When you and this girl appeared in the human sovereign city, someone went to inform him. This old man only expected this situation and came to join in the fun." He paused and looked at Yang Kai. "How about it? Do you still want to refuse?" Before Yang Kai could reply, the frightened Fushu looked as if he had seen his savior. He looked at the man with the goatee. "I remember now. You are that person by the third prince's side. Yes, that person. Hurry up and kill this guy for me. This prince will reward you handsomely." The man with the goatee looked at the first prince with disdain. "This old man is the third prince's man. Why would I help you?" The first prince is confused. Fushu's face paled. "Then what will it take for you to help? How about I give you the two women outside?" The man with the goatee looked between his legs and sighed. "This old man is already so old. It is not easy to guard this little bit of Yang Yuan. I appreciate the first prince's kindness, but it is a pity that this old man cannot accept it." How can you be like this?" Fushu's face was filled with disappointment. The man with the goatee turned to look at Yang Kai. "Is your answer the same?" Yang Kai rested Myriad's sword on his shoulder and sneered. The man with the goatee understood and said to Fushu, "Although this old man will not help, this old man can show the first prince a way out." Chapter 2958. Speak, speak. Fushu hurriedly said. He didn't have many strong subordinates, and all of them were lying on the ground, so he could only place his hopes on the goatee. The goatee said, "With the protection of the holy tree, the crown prince will definitely not be injured. Since he won't be injured, why are you afraid of him? You are a prince and can use the power of the holy tree. Even if you can't beat him, can't you just steal and run? As long as you return to your residence, what can he do to you?" Fushu's eyes lit up when he heard this. He scolded himself for being so scared. It was indeed as the old goatee said, he had the protection of the holy tree, so ordinary people couldn't hurt him. Since he wouldn't be injured, what was there to be afraid of? He hated himself for being so scared that he didn't even think of such a thing. He hated Kai Yang for making him lose face. Looking at Zhu Qing, who was standing over there, he gradually regained his courage and slowly stood up from the corner of the wall. Although his body was still trembling, it was much better than begging for mercy and running away. The previous conflict had attracted the attention of many residents of Emperor City. At this moment, the tea house was surrounded by onlookers from all directions. Several groups of patrolling guards arrived and were shocked to see the mess in the tea house when they parted the crowd. When they saw Fushu, they all came forward to greet him and asked about the situation. "You all came at the right time." The appearance of these guards increased Fushu's confidence. He pointed at Yang Kai and said, "This person is vicious and evil. He injured my guards and insulted this prince. Quickly come with this prince and take him down." When the guards heard this, they agreed one after another. A sneer appeared on Fushu's face as he suddenly began to chant an incantation. The incantation was cryptic and difficult to understand, causing the onlookers to be confused while Yang Kai was taken aback. He was too familiar with this chant. When the chant sounded, he couldn't help but think of a magnificent battle scene. At that time, he had 100,000 troops under his command. The various branches coordinated and fearlessly attacked the demon race camp. The wizard would chant such a chant. The chanting of the incantation made one's blood boil, filling one's chest with murderous intent. They wanted nothing more than to destroy everything in front of them. The Fushu's incantation was very short. There seemed to be some changes, but they were still the same. A ray of light suddenly bloomed and enveloped the guards. In the next moment, the blood and chi of the many guards suddenly surged, and their bodies swelled up like balloons. Their exposed skin glowed with a dark red light, and even their eyes turned crimson red. Timidity and fear disappeared from their bodies, replaced by determination and bravery. Bloodthirst. Yang Kai's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He had never thought that after more than 100,000 years, he would be able to see someone else use the bloodthirst technique. Although there were some changes to the bloodthirst technique, Yang Kai definitely wouldn't mistake it. Previously in the cave, when manager Liao used the technique, there were some traces of wizard techniques. However, it wasn't obvious, so Yang Kai didn't pay too much attention to it. But now, it seemed that the reincarnation world still had wizard techniques. He didn't know how it had been passed down for so long. Zhu Qing obviously didn't expect such a scene. Her beautiful eyes curiously looked at the cultivator that had changed. She was somewhat puzzled. When the Fushu's incantation sounded again, Yang Kai already knew what kind of wizard technique this was. This wizard technique was the most troublesome type of wizard technique for the demon race. It was also a type of wizard technique that couldn't be cracked. It was because of the protection of this wizard technique that the barbarians could compete with the demon race. Yang Kai knew how terrifying this wizard technique was. How could he let the Fushu use it? He took a step forward, and the myriad's sword leisurely disappeared. When he clapped his hands together, a huge crescent blade suddenly slashed towards the Fushu. This attack appeared very suddenly, and its power was unpredictable. It made the goatee secretly shocked. The Fushu was naturally shocked, but he didn't care. He remembered the goatee's words. Even though he was shocked, he didn't have any intention of dodging or blocking. The incantation from his mouth became louder and louder. The huge crescent blade hit the Fushu's body as expected, but was blocked by the green light that appeared on the Fushu's body. However, this time, the green light was especially dense, and it was almost lush. This green light was a type of protection. It would become stronger when facing a strong opponent. On the other hand, it showed the powerful killing power of the crescent blade. Silently, the divine technique that could devour space couldn't do anything to the Fushu. The green light actually blocked the crescent blade's attack again, but a small crack appeared at the spot where the crescent blade came in contact with it. It was almost undetectable. This kind of protection wasn't invincible, but it wasn't unbreakable. Yang Kai suddenly realized this point. The reason why Yang Kai's previous attacks didn't have any effect was because they weren't strong enough. And in this moment of delay, the Fushu had completed his wizard technique. Another ray of light bloomed and shrouded the guards. In the dark, there seemed to be something that connected these people together, making them live and die together. Everyone's chi and blood gathered in one place and soared into the sky. Zhu Qing's expression changed. Life chains. Yang Kai gritted his teeth and growled. He never thought that he would one day face the two great war wizard techniques, the bloodthirst technique and life chains. In the Thousand Illusions dream world, the barbarian army led by Yang Kai was invincible thanks to these two wizard techniques. Because of this, Yang Kai knew better than anyone how powerful they were. The goatee was surprised. You know about saint techniques? What are saint techniques? Yang Kai took a few steps back and stood side by side with Zhu Qing, looking forward coldly. There were about 30 guards in the group who had been affected by the bloodthirst technique and life chains. No matter who it was, their cultivation was below the Emperor realm. The strongest one was from the Third Order Dao Source realm, and the weakest was only a Second Order Origin King. If this group of people were to fight alone, Yang Kai could easily blow them away with a single breath and teach them how to behave. But now, they had the capital to fight to the death with the people of the Emperor realm. The name of the war wizard technique was not just a bluff. The goatee said, only the members of the imperial family who have 6 leaves and above can use the power of the holy tree to cast this secret technique. If you don't know about the saint techniques, how can you say the name of the saint techniques? Yang Kai did not answer him. He whispered to Zhu Qing, this is a little troublesome. Zhu Qing said, I'll take care of these people. I'll leave that prince to you. Yang Kai shook his head and said, they're not easy to deal with. Let me do it. Zhu Qing said leisurely, don't underestimate me, okay? Also, I don't want to fight with that annoying guy. Since you said so, that's the only way. Yang Kai shrugged. Zhu Qing snorted, if you can't take care of him, don't even think about touching me in the future. As soon as she finished speaking, her figure flashed and she pounced forward. Yang Kai wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead and said, do you have to be so ruthless? The goatee poured cold water on them and said, it's useless. Since the saint techniques have been cast, you have no chance of winning unless you can reverse the saint techniques. However, you'll need the holy tree's protection first. Fushu was furious. Old man, whose side are you on? The goatee said calmly, I'm just here to watch the show. I'm not taking sides. You should focus on fighting the enemy, first prince. Be careful not to embarrass the imperial family. Fushu was infuriated by the goatee's words. He said with great ambition, open your eyes wide and watch carefully. As they spoke, Zhu Qing had already clashed with the 30 or so guards. When the violent energy surged, the small tea house collapsed. The owner of the tea house ran to the street and cried bitterly as he cursed. Soon, Zhu Qing discovered how difficult it was to deal with this group of people. They weren't very agile. After all, there were more than 30 of them. When they fought, they didn't cooperate at all. They didn't have any order, and they often interfered with each other. They looked clumsy. However, even though there were more than 30 of them, every single one of them had the ability to take her attacks head-on. Every time she attacked, any random person would be able to block it. This was simply unbelievable. She was a member of the dragon race, and her strength was violent. Even a third-layer Emperor Realm cultivator wouldn't dare say that they could take a hit from her without being injured. However, this ragtag group of guards could do it. After a few punches, Zhu Qing quickly discovered the secret behind their ability to block her attacks. She didn't know what was wrong with these people. No matter who tried to block her, her attacks would be dispersed and shared by these 30 or so people. If one chopstick could be easily broken, 2 chopsticks would be twice the resistance, let alone these 30 or so people who had been enchanted with some kind of saint technique. After their chi and blood force was stimulated, these people didn't fear pain or danger. Everyone's eyes turned red, and the number of attacks they could withstand increased exponentially. Zhu Qing's face turned cold, and her attacks became more and more violent. To her, what happened just now was just a test. With a rumble, the battlefield kept shifting. Soon, half of the street was affected. On the old site of the tea house, Yang Kai stared at Fushu and said indifferently, you heard what the madam said. For the sake of this young master's future happiness, please, lie down, first prince. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly appeared in front of Fushu, almost sticking to him. The goatee's eyes narrowed, and his pupils shrank to the size of needles. In that instant, he didn't see what happened. Fushu screamed and almost fell again. However, he quickly calmed down and gritted his teeth. Do you think this prince is afraid of you? Yang Kai raised his hand and threw a punch at Fushu's face. Before Fushu could react, the fist was already in front of him. Fortunately, the green light blocked the attack and didn't injure him. Otherwise, he would have died on the spot. His face was pale, but he gritted his teeth and chanted an incantation. He wanted to cast the bloodlust spell on himself so that he wouldn't be afraid anymore. Yang Kai suddenly looked at Fushu's chest and said, First Prince, you're only an 8-leaf cultivator. TSK, TSK. Even the third prince is a 9-leaf cultivator. Why is it that you, the eldest brother, have one less leaf than him? Is it because the human sovereign favors him, or is it because you're unpopular? Fu Shu's incantation came to an abrupt halt. He said angrily, "Stop talking nonsense. Why would father favor the third prince? I'm the first prince." You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,